Who is the Archangel Uriel, and why do so few people know his incredible story? Tonight, you're about to discover the complete journey of God's fire, the Archangel whose blazing sword guards the gates of Eden, whose divine light pierces through the darkest mysteries of creation. From his role in biblical prophecies to his appearances throughout sacred texts, Uriel's story has remained hidden in plain sight, waiting for souls seeking both spiritual truth and peaceful rest. As you settle in for sleep, let the gentle telling of Uriel's divine mission wash over you. His warnings to Noah before the flood, his guidance to the prophets, and his eternal vigil as heaven's fiery guardian. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue creating more content to help you unwind. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a global community here. Now let's ease into today's story, shall we? In the quiet corners of ancient texts, where shadows dance with forgotten words, lies the story of an angel whose name whispers through time like wind through autumn leaves. Uriel, the flame of God, the light of the divine. Yet unlike his famous brothers Michael and Gabriel, Uriel remains wrapped in mystery, his tale scattered across pages that many have never read. Picture an angel standing at the edge of understanding, holding a torch that burns with wisdom itself. This is Uriel, whose very presence speaks of secrets too profound for ordinary minds to grasp. While Michael wields his sword and Gabriel carries his trumpet, Uriel bears something far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful, the fire of divine knowledge that illuminates the darkest corners of existence. The name itself tells us everything and nothing. Uriel means God is my light, or fire of God, depending on how you listen to the ancient Hebrew syllables. Both meanings dance together in perfect harmony for what is divine fire but the purest form of light. What is wisdom but illumination, burning away the shadows of ignorance? In the great tapestry of angelic beings, Uriel occupies a unique space. He is the angel of the West, the guardian of the season of autumn, the keeper of divine fire that purifies without destroying. Ancient texts describe him as the angel who stands before the throne of God, his face blazing with the reflection of divine glory, his wings spread wide to shield mortal eyes from truths too bright to bear. Why then, you might wonder, does his story remain so hidden? Why do we speak easily of Michael's battles and Gabriel's announcements, yet stumble when we try to tell of Uriel's quiet ministry? The answer lies in the very nature of wisdom itself. Wisdom doesn't shout from mountaintops or announce itself with trumpets. It whispers, it waits. It reveals itself only to those who are ready to receive its gentle fire. Uriel's story was too vast, too complex for the simple narratives that found their way into mainstream religious texts. His role as the angel of repentance, the guardian of divine mysteries, the interpreter of God's will, these responsibilities required a depth of understanding that early church leaders found difficult to contain within neat doctrinal boundaries. So his tales were preserved in other places, in texts that scholars call apocryphal, in traditions that flow like underground rivers beneath the surface of organized religion. But make no mistake, though his story may be less familiar, Uriel's influence has shaped human understanding of the divine for thousands of years. He appears in the dreams of mystics, in the visions of prophets, in the quiet moments when seekers of truth find themselves suddenly illuminated by understanding they cannot quite explain. He is the angel who stands at the threshold between the known and the unknowable, holding out his hand to guide those brave enough to step into the light of divine wisdom. In Jewish tradition, Uriel is one of the four great archangels who stand at the four corners of God's throne. In Christian mysticism, he is the angel of the final judgment, the one who will sound the trumpet at the end of days. In Islamic lore, though his name may change, his essence remains, the angel of divine fire who purifies and illuminates. Ancient texts tell us that Uriel was present at the most pivotal moments in human history, though often working behind the scenes, his influence felt rather than seen. When Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, it was Uriel who was stationed at the gate, not as a harsh guardian, but as a reminder of what was lost and what might yet be regained through wisdom and repentance. When the great flood came, Uriel was among the angels who helped guide the divine plan, ensuring that righteousness would survive the waters of judgment. But perhaps most importantly, Uriel is the angel of personal revelation. While Michael fights our battles and Gabriel brings us messages, Uriel lights the candle of understanding within our own hearts. He is the angel who helps us see clearly, who burns away the illusions that keep us from truth, who guides us gently toward the light of divine wisdom. His symbol is fire, but not the destructive flames of earthly conflagration. Uriel's fire is the sacred flame that burns in the sanctuary of the soul, the light that illuminates without consuming, the warmth that comforts without overwhelming. It is the fire of the burning bush that spoke to Moses, the flame that danced above the heads of the apostles at Pentecost, the gentle radiance that surrounds those who have touched the hem of divine understanding. Tonight, as we begin this journey through Uriel's story, we invite you to imagine that sacred fire burning softly in your own heart. Let its gentle light guide you through the corridors of ancient wisdom, past the forgotten corners where angels dwell, into the quiet spaces where divine mysteries unfold like flowers in the eternal garden of God's love. The story of Uriel is ultimately the story of wisdom itself, patient, persistent, always available to those who seek it with humble hearts. It is the story of divine light that never dims, divine fire that never dies, divine love that never fails to illuminate the path home. Angels in the ancient world. Long before the pages of Scripture were written, before temples rose to touch the sky, before prayers were first whispered in the darkness, human hearts already sensed the presence of something beyond the veil of ordinary sight. In the cradle of civilization, where the first cities grew beside great rivers, people looked up at the stars and knew they were not alone. The ancient world was alive with messengers from the divine realm. They called them by different names in different languages, but the essence remained the same, beings of light and power who moved between heaven and earth, carrying the will of the gods to mortal hearts. These were the ancestors of our angels, the first whispers of what would later become the great chorus of celestial beings. In the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers painted the landscape green, the Sumerians spoke of divine messengers called Sukal. These beings served the gods with perfect loyalty, carrying their commands across the vast expanse between the heavenly and earthly realms. Clay tablets from 4,000 years ago tell of winged figures standing guard at the gates of temples, their eyes bright with divine fire, their presence both comforting and terrible. The Babylonians and Assyrians inherited these traditions, weaving them into elaborate tapestries of divine hierarchy. Their art shows us winged beings with human faces and eagle wings, creatures of immense power who served as intermediaries between the gods and humanity. In their epic poems, we read of divine messengers who appear to heroes at crucial moments, offering guidance, warning, or blessing as the gods decree. But it was not only in Mesopotamia that humans sensed the presence of these divine messengers. In the shadow of the Great Pyramids, Egyptian priests spoke of beings they called Neteru, divine principles that took angelic form to interact with the mortal world. The walls of ancient tombs show us figures with wings of gold and lapis lazuli, beings who guided souls through the journey of death and rebirth. Egyptian mythology tells of messenger gods who carried the words of Ra across the sky, who whispered wisdom to pharaohs in their dreams, who stood guard at the boundaries between life and death. These divine messengers were not separate from the gods, but emanations of divine will. Expressions of divine love made manifest in forms that human hearts could comprehend. The influence of these ancient traditions cannot be overstated. When Hebrew tribes wandered through the desert, when they settled in the Promised Land, when they began to develop their own understanding of the divine, they carried with them the accumulated wisdom of millennia. The angels of Hebrew scripture did not emerge from empty air, but from the rich soil of ancient human experience with the divine. Yet the Hebrew understanding of angels was unique. Where other cultures saw divine messengers as extensions of various gods, the Hebrews understood them as servants of one supreme God, unified in purpose and will. This shift in understanding would prove revolutionary, creating the foundation for all later angelology in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The word malach in Hebrew means simply messenger, but it carries depths of meaning that simple translation cannot capture. These divine messengers were not merely postal workers of the heavens, but living embodiments of God's presence in the world. When they appeared to humans, they brought not just messages, but the very breath of the divine, the warmth of divine love, the light of divine truth. Ancient texts tell us that these messengers appeared at crucial moments in human history. They stood with Abraham under the oaks of Mamre, wrestled with Jacob beside the river Jabbok, called to Moses from the burning bush, announced births to barren women, guided the Israelites through the wilderness with pillars of cloud and fire. Each appearance was a reminder that heaven was never far from earth, that divine love was always reaching toward human hearts. But even in these early Hebrew texts, we can see the seeds of what would later become the elaborate angelology of the Second Temple period. Some angels begin to be distinguished from others. Some appear to have specific roles and responsibilities. Some seem to possess names and individual characteristics that set them apart from the general chorus of divine messengers. The prophet Ezekiel gives us perhaps the most vivid picture of these celestial beings in his famous vision of the divine chariot. He describes creatures with 4 faces and 4 wings, beings whose very appearance speaks of power and glory beyond human comprehension. These are not gentle messengers, but awesome servants of an awesome God, beings whose presence makes the very foundations of the earth tremble. Daniel too speaks of angelic beings with individual characteristics. He tells of one like a son of man who appears in divine visions, of messengers who interpret the meaning of prophetic dreams, of spiritual princes who wage war in heavenly realms. In his writings, we see the beginning of the understanding that would later place angels like Uriel in specific roles within the cosmic order. The wisdom literature of ancient Israel also speaks of divine messengers, though often in more subtle terms. The Psalms are filled with references to angels who serve as God's messengers, who guard the righteous, who carry out divine will in the world. These texts present angels not as distant beings, but as intimate participants in human life, as present as breath, as close as prayer. Greek influence, which swept through the ancient world following Alexander's conquests, brought new ways of thinking about divine beings. The Greeks had their own traditions of divine messengers. Hermes carrying messages between gods and mortals, guardian spirits watching over individuals, divine principles taking personal form. When Greek thought met Hebrew tradition, it created fertile ground for new understandings of angelic beings. This was the world into which more complex angelology would soon emerge, a world where divine messengers had been known and revered for thousands of years, a world where the boundary between heaven and earth was understood to be permeable, where divine beings moved with purpose and grace, a world ready to receive new revelations about the nature and roles of angels like Uriel, whose stories would soon begin to unfold in the sacred texts of the Second Temple period. The stage was set. The ancient world had prepared human hearts to receive the fuller revelation of angelic reality that was soon to come. The birth of angelology. In the centuries following the Babylonian exile, something extraordinary happened in Jewish religious thought. Like a garden awakening after winter's sleep, the understanding of angels began to bloom with unprecedented richness and detail. What had once been simple acknowledgement of divine messengers grew into elaborate systems of heavenly hierarchy, complete with names, ranks, and specific divine responsibilities. This flowering of angelology did not happen overnight. It grew slowly, carefully, nurtured by the unique circumstances of Jewish life in the Second Temple period. The trauma of exile had shattered many assumptions about how God worked in the world. If God was all-powerful and loving, why had the temple been destroyed? Why had the chosen people been scattered? These questions demanded new ways of understanding divine providence and the complex relationships between heaven and earth. The answers came gradually, woven into new texts that would never find their way into the official biblical canon, but would profoundly influence Jewish and Christian thought for centuries to come. These were the apocryphal and pseudepigraphic writings, books attributed to ancient figures like Enoch, Ezra, and Baruch, but actually composed during this period of theological creativity and exploration. In these texts, angels began to acquire individual personalities. They received names that reflected their specific roles in the divine economy. They were organized into hierarchies that mirrored earthly kingdoms but operated according to heavenly principles. Most importantly, they became intermediaries who could explain the apparent distance between an all good God and a world filled with suffering and evil. The most significant of these texts for understanding Uriel's emergence was the Book of Enoch, specifically the section known as 1 Enoch. This remarkable work, composed over several centuries, presents the most detailed picture of angelic hierarchy and function found anywhere in ancient literature. It is here that Uriel first steps fully into the light of recorded history, not as a vague divine messenger, but as a specific angelic being with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. But to understand Uriel's emergence, we must first understand the theological revolution that was taking place. Jewish thinkers were grappling with what scholars call the problem of transcendence. If God was truly infinite and perfect, how could such a being interact directly with finite, imperfect humans? The answer they developed was elegant and profound. God worked through intermediaries, through angelic beings who could bridge the gap between the infinite and the finite. This concept was not entirely new. Other ancient cultures had similar ideas about divine hierarchy, but the Jewish development was unique in its monotheistic framework. These angelic intermediaries were not lesser gods, but created beings, servants of the one true God, each reflecting different aspects of divine nature and will. The number 7 became particularly significant in this angelology. 7 archangels, 7 heavens, 7 divine attributes manifested through angelic ministry. This was not arbitrary numerology, but reflected deep theological convictions about the perfection and completeness of divine order. 7 represented wholeness, fullness, the complete manifestation of divine will in creation. It is within this framework of 7 great archangels that Uriel found his place. Different texts give slightly different lists of these 7, but Uriel appears consistently as one of the primary angelic princes who stand before God's throne. His specific role as the angel of divine fire and wisdom made him particularly important in a theological system that emphasized the purifying and illuminating aspects of divine presence. The Book of Enoch presents Uriel as one of the 4 great archangels who stand at the 4 corners of God's throne, each responsible for one of the cardinal directions and the spiritual forces associated with it. Uriel is the angel of the west, the direction associated with the setting sun, with endings and beginnings, with the mysteries of death and rebirth. This positioning reflects his role as the angel of final things, the one who reveals divine secrets and guides souls through the transformative fire of divine judgment. But Uriel's emergence in Second Temple angelology was not merely a matter of theological categorization. He fulfilled specific religious and psychological needs for Jewish communities struggling to maintain their identity in a complex and often hostile world. As the angel of divine fire, he represented the possibility of purification and renewal. As the angel of wisdom, he offered hope that divine truth could still be accessed even when traditional sources of authority seemed compromised or absent. The development of written angelology also reflected changing ideas about prophecy and divine revelation. The great prophetic voices of the exile period, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 2nd Isaiah, had proclaimed God's word with authority and power. But in the post-exilic period, that kind of direct prophetic revelation seemed to have ended. Angels filled this gap, serving as continuing sources of divine guidance and revelation for communities that still needed to hear God's voice. Uriel's role as an interpreter of divine mysteries made him particularly important in this context. He was not just a messenger, but a teacher, one who could explain the deeper meanings behind divine actions and reveal the hidden patterns of divine providence. This made him especially beloved by Jewish mystics and scholars who sought to understand the complexities of divine justice and mercy. The Greek influence that permeated the Hellenistic world also shaped this emerging angelology. Greek philosophical concepts about the organization of the cosmos, about the relationship between the material, and about the nature of divine intermediaries, all found their way into Jewish angelic speculation. But these foreign influences were transformed by Jewish monotheism into something uniquely Hebrew. The result was a rich and complex angelology that would profoundly influence not only Judaism but also Christianity and Islam. Angels became not just occasional divine messengers, but permanent participants in the cosmic order, each with specific roles and responsibilities, each reflecting particular aspects of divine nature and will. Uriel's place in this developing system was secure and significant. As the angel of divine fire, he represented the purifying and transformative power of divine love. As the angel of wisdom, he embodied the illuminating and revelatory aspects of divine truth. As one of the great archangels, he stood as a bridge between the infinite God and finite creation, making divine presence accessible to human hearts and minds. This was the birth of angelology as a systematic theological discipline. From this foundation would grow centuries of further development, speculation, and reverence. But the essential patterns were established here in the creative theological ferment of the Second Temple period, when Jewish thinkers dared to imagine the invisible hierarchies of heaven and found among them the blazing figure of Uriel, the fire of God. The Book of Enoch, Uriel's first appearance. In the mists of ancient literature, few texts have captured the imagination quite like the Book of Enoch. This remarkable work, attributed to the mysterious figure who walked with God and was taken up without tasting death, opens doorways into realms of divine mystery that few other texts dare to explore. And it is here, in these pages that shimmer with otherworldly light, that we encounter Uriel for the first time as a fully realized angelic being. The Book of Enoch is not one book, but several, woven together over centuries by anonymous scribes who felt called to preserve and expand upon the ancient traditions of Enoch's heavenly journey. The oldest sections may date back to the 3rd century before the Common Era, making them among the earliest detailed accounts of angelic hierarchy and heavenly geography that have survived to our time. Picture, if you will, a man standing at the edge of the known world, gazing up at stars that seem to whisper secrets in languages older than human speech. This is Enoch, the 7th from Adam, chosen by divine grace to witness things that no other mortal has seen. The text tells us that he was a righteous man who pleased God, and because of his righteousness, he was granted visions that would illuminate the hidden workings of the cosmos. The journey begins simply enough. Enoch is taken up from the earth, lifted by divine power beyond the boundaries of ordinary human experience. But as he ascends, the simple becomes profound, the familiar becomes mystical, and the visible world gives way to realms of pure spiritual reality. It is during this cosmic journey that Enoch first encounters Uriel, though the meeting is so seamlessly woven into the narrative that we might almost miss its significance. Uriel appears not with fanfare or dramatic announcement, but with the quiet authority of one who has always belonged in this realm of divine mystery. He is introduced as Uriel, one of the holy angels who takes charge of the thunder and the terror, a description that immediately signals his role as a being of both power and responsibility. But Uriel's thunder is not the chaotic crash of earthly storms. It is the ordered voice of divine authority, the sound that creation itself makes when it speaks the will of its creator. His terror is not the fear that destroys, but the awe that transforms, the sacred trembling that comes upon those who suddenly realize they are standing in the presence of the divine. As Enoch's guide and interpreter, Uriel takes on the role that will define him throughout the literature of divine revelation. He is the angel who explains, who illuminates, who makes the incomprehensible accessible to human understanding. When Enoch sees visions that overwhelm his mortal mind, it is Uriel who provides the key to their meaning. The text describes Uriel showing Enoch the luminaries of heaven, the sun, moon, and stars in their courses. But this is not mere astronomy. Uriel reveals the spiritual principles that govern celestial motion, the divine laws that keep the cosmos in perfect harmony. He explains how the movements of heavenly bodies reflect the unchanging nature of divine order, how the dance of planets and stars is actually a prayer of praise offered by creation to its creator. Through Uriel's teaching, Enoch learns that time itself is a divine gift, carefully measured and purposefully ordered. The angel shows him the gates through which the sun passes in its daily journey, the chambers where the winds are stored, the reservoirs from which rain and snow are released upon the earth. Everything in creation, Uriel explains, follows divine patterns established before the foundation of the world. But perhaps most significantly, Uriel serves as Enoch's guide through the mysteries of divine justice. When Enoch sees visions of judgment and punishment, when he witnesses the fate of the wicked and the reward of the righteous, it is Uriel who explains the deeper principles at work. The angel reveals that divine justice is not arbitrary punishment, but the natural cultural consequence of moral choices, the way the universe itself responds to righteousness and wickedness. In one of the most haunting passages, Uriel shows Enoch the place where the fallen angels are imprisoned, the rebellious watchers who corrupted both themselves and humanity through their disobedience. The description is filled with imagery of fire and darkness, of binding and torment, but Uriel's explanation reveals that even this punishment serves a redemptive purpose within the larger divine plan. The angel's role as interpreter becomes particularly important when Enoch encounters visions of the end times. Uriel explains the signs that will precede the final judgment, the cosmic upheavals that will mark the transition from the current age to the age of divine righteousness. But he does so with a calm authority that transforms terrifying visions into revelations of hope. Throughout these encounters, Uriel emerges as more than just a messenger or guide. He becomes a teacher in the deepest sense, one who not only provides information, but transforms understanding. His instruction changes Enoch from a righteous man into a visionary prophet, from someone who walked with God into someone who could speak authoritatively about divine mysteries. The relationship between Uriel and Enoch in this text establishes patterns that will be repeated throughout the literature of divine revelation. The angel appears not to overwhelm or intimidate, but to illuminate and instruct. His power is channeled through wisdom, his authority expressed through patient teaching. He represents the divine desire to be known and understood, not as an object of fear, but as the source of all truth and wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, Uriel's first appearance in the Book of Enoch establishes his credentials as the angel of divine secrets. He is the one who reveals hidden things, who explains mysteries, who bridges the gap between divine knowledge and human understanding. This role will follow him throughout the centuries, making him beloved by mystics and scholars who seek to penetrate the deeper meanings of existence. The Book of Enoch presents Uriel as completely at home in the heavenly realm, moving with the easy familiarity of one who has always belonged there. Yet he is also perfectly capable of communicating with human consciousness, translating divine realities into forms that mortal minds can grasp. This dual nature, fully angelic yet accessible to humanity, makes him the perfect guide for those who would explore the boundaries between heaven and earth. In these ancient pages, Uriel steps forward as the angel of enlightenment, the divine flame that illuminates without consuming, the teacher who reveals truth with patience and grace. His first appearance sets the stage for all his subsequent roles in the literature of divine revelation, establishing him as one of the most important and beloved figures in the angelic hierarchy. Uriel and the Watchers. In the shadowed corridors of ancient memory, few stories carry the weight of cosmic tragedy quite like the tale of the Watchers. These were angels of the highest order, beings of pure light and purpose, who were given the sacred responsibility of watching over humanity in its early days. Yet their story became one of the great cautionary tales of spiritual literature, a reminder that even beings of divine origin could fall from grace through the corruption of free will. And standing at the heart of this cosmic drama, wielding the terrible fire of divine justice, we find Uriel in one of his most solemn and powerful roles. The Book of Enoch tells us that in the days when humanity was young and the boundary between heaven and earth was thinner than gossamer, 200 angels were chosen to serve as watchers over the children of men. These were not ordinary angels, but beings of extraordinary wisdom and power, entrusted with guiding human development according to divine will. Their leader was Semjaza, an angel whose name meant rebellious against God, though at the time of his appointment, such rebellion was unthinkable. Under his authority served other great angels, Azazel, who would teach humanity the arts of war, Armaros, who would reveal the secrets of enchantment, Barakijal, who would instruct in astrology, and many others, each carrying knowledge that was meant to remain hidden until humanity was ready to receive it. For a time, these watchers fulfilled their divine mandate with perfect obedience. They observed human life with detached compassion, intervening only when divine providence required their assistance. They were the invisible guardians of the early world, the silent protectors who ensured that humanity would develop according to divine design. But gradually, something began to change in the hearts of these celestial beings. As they watched humanity more closely, as they observed the beauty and passion of human life, they began to experience something that angels were never meant to feel: desire. Not the pure love that angels naturally bear toward all creation, but the possessive, consuming want that belongs to fallen nature. The daughters of men were fair in their eyes, and the watchers began to lust after them with a hunger that grew stronger with each passing day. This desire was not merely physical, but spiritual, a longing to abandon their heavenly nature and descend into the complexity and limitation of earthly existence. Semjaza, their leader, proposed a pact that would forever change the course of both angelic and human history. If they were going to rebel against their divine mandate, he reasoned, they should do so together, binding themselves with oaths that none could break. 200 angels swore upon Mount Hermon to descend to earth, to take human wives, and to abandon their watching posts in the heavenly realm. The consequences of this decision rippled through creation like cracks in a perfect mirror. The watchers descended and took wives from among the daughters of men, and their union produced offspring that were neither fully human nor fully angelic. These were the Nephilim, the giants of ancient lore, beings of immense size and power who possessed the spiritual knowledge of angels, but the fallen nature of rebellious spirits. But the corruption did not stop there. The fallen watchers began to teach humanity secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Azazel taught the making of weapons and the arts of war, introducing violence and conflict to a world that had known only peace. Others taught the use of cosmetics and jewelry, awakening vanity and pride. Still others revealed the secrets of astrology and divination, leading humanity into forbidden knowledge of future events. The result was chaos. The earth became filled with violence as the Nephilim tyrannized over ordinary humans. Knowledge that should have been revealed gradually over centuries was dumped upon humanity all at once, creating confusion and corruption. The very foundations of divine order seemed to be crumbling under the weight of angelic rebellion. It was then that the four great archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, brought the crisis before the throne of the Most High. They had watched the unfolding disaster with growing alarm, seeing how the rebellion of the Watchers was corrupting both the heavenly and earthly realms. Their petition to God was both a cry for justice and a plea for the restoration of divine order. The response from the divine throne was swift and decisive. The Most High decreed that the rebellion must be stopped, the corruption cleansed, and divine order restored. But this was no simple matter of divine fiat. The situation required careful, precise action that would bring justice without destroying the possibility of redemption. To each of the four great archangels was given a specific role in the divine response. Gabriel was sent to warn Noah of the coming flood that would cleanse the earth of corruption. Raphael was charged with binding Azazel and casting him into the darkness. Michael was commanded to bind Semjaza and the other leaders of the rebellion. And to Uriel fell perhaps the most terrible responsibility of all. He was to serve as the herald of divine judgment, the one who would announce the coming destruction and explain its necessity. But more than that, he was to be the executor of divine justice, the angel who would carry out the sentence of condemnation upon the fallen watchers. The text describes Uriel's mission with vivid intensity. He appears to Enoch in a vision, his face blazing with divine fire, his presence both terrible and beautiful. In his hand he carries the flame of divine justice, not the chaotic fire of earthly destruction, but the purifying flame that burns away corruption while preserving what is pure and good. Uriel's message to Enoch is both warning and explanation. He reveals the full extent of the Watchers' corruption, showing how their rebellion has introduced violence, deception, and spiritual confusion into the world. But he also explains that divine justice will restore the balance, that the coming judgment will cleanse the earth and prepare it for a new beginning. The angel's role in executing judgment upon the watchers demonstrates his unique position in the angelic hierarchy. Unlike Michael, who binds through power, or Gabriel, who warns through prophecy, Uriel purifies through fire. His flame burns away the corruption that has infected both the rebellious angels and their human victims, separating the pure from the impure with divine precision. But even in judgment, Uriel's fire carries the possibility of redemption. The text suggests that his burning is not merely punitive but transformative, offering the possibility of purification even to those who have fallen furthest from grace. His fire is the fire of divine love, terrible in its purity, but ultimately aimed at restoration rather than destruction. The story of Uriel and the Watchers establishes several themes that will echo throughout his appearances in sacred literature. He emerges as the angel of divine justice, the one who ensures that cosmic order is maintained even when chaos threatens to overwhelm creation. His fire becomes the symbol of divine judgment that is both terrible and merciful, destructive and redemptive. Most importantly, this story establishes Uriel as the angel who stands at the boundary between divine mercy and divine justice, ensuring that both are perfectly balanced in the execution of divine will. He is the flame that burns away corruption while preserving what is pure, the light that illuminates truth while consuming falsehood. In the quiet spaces between judgment and mercy, Uriel stands as the eternal reminder that divine love itself sometimes requires the purifying fire of justice to restore what has been corrupted and heal what has been broken. Guardian of the Gates. In the great mythologies of the world, certain images appear again and again, woven into the collective memory of humanity, like threads in an ancient tapestry. Among the most powerful of these is the figure of the guardian at the gate, the divine sentinel who stands between one realm and another, protecting sacred spaces from those who would enter unprepared or uninvited. In the traditions surrounding Uriel, this role of guardian takes on profound significance. He is not merely a doorkeeper, but a protector of thresholds, a guide for those who would pass from one state of being to another. His guardianship encompasses both the gates of paradise and the gates of the underworld, making him a figure of unique authority in the geography of the soul. The most famous of Uriel's guardianships is his role as the angel stationed at the gates of Eden after the expulsion of Adam and Eve. This image has captured human imagination for millennia. The angel with the flaming sword, standing eternal watch over the entrance to paradise, ensuring that fallen humanity cannot return to the garden until the conditions of divine justice have been satisfied. But the traditional image of Uriel as a harsh guardian wielding a sword of fire misses the deeper spiritual truth of his role. Ancient texts suggest that his presence at Eden's gate is not primarily punitive, but protective. He stands there not to keep humanity out forever, but to ensure that no one enters the realm of divine perfection, while still carrying the corruption of fallen nature. The flaming sword in Uriel's hand is described in the earliest texts as turning in all directions, suggesting not static opposition, but dynamic discernment. This is the fire of divine wisdom that sees all things clearly, that can distinguish between the pure and the impure, the ready and the unready. It is a sword that wounds only to heal, that cuts away only what prevents the healing of the soul. Consider the deeper symbolism at work in this guardianship. Eden represents not just a physical location, but a state of spiritual consciousness, the condition of perfect harmony between the human soul and divine will. Uriel's guardianship of its gates means that he oversees the process by which souls are prepared for that return to divine union. His fire becomes the agent of purification that makes such return possible. Those who would re-enter Eden must pass through the flame of divine testing, must allow the fire of divine love to burn away everything that is not compatible with the perfection of paradise. Uriel's role is to ensure that this purification is complete, that no trace of corruption enters the sacred space. But Uriel's guardianship extends beyond the gates of Eden to encompass other crucial thresholds in the spiritual journey. Ancient Jewish traditions speak of him as the guardian of the gates of the underworld, the angel who oversees the passage of souls from earthly life to whatever lies beyond. This role places him at the very heart of humanity's deepest mysteries, the nature of death and what follows it. In this capacity, Uriel serves not as a grim reaper, but as a compassionate guide who helps souls navigate the transition from one form of existence to another. His fire illuminates the path through the darkness of death, revealing the spiritual realities that physical eyes cannot see. He stands at the threshold between life and death, ensuring that each soul passes through according to divine will and divine mercy. The underground traditions of Jewish mysticism tell stories of Uriel's encounters with souls at the moment of death. These tales describe him as a being of tremendous compassion, whose fire burns away the illusions and attachments that might otherwise trap souls in confusion or despair. His presence at the threshold of death transforms what could be a terrifying transition into an opportunity for spiritual liberation. Some texts describe Uriel as the angel who shows souls the true nature of their earthly lives, revealing both the good and evil they have done with perfect clarity. But this revelation is not meant to torment, but to instruct, not to condemn, but to prepare the soul for whatever comes next. His fire burns away self-deception and false justification, leaving only the truth of what each soul has become through its choices. The tradition of Uriel as guardian of gates also extends to his role in protecting sacred spaces and times. He is said to stand watch over temples and sanctuaries, ensuring that only those who approach with proper reverence and preparation can enter into the presence of the divine. His guardianship creates a sacred boundary that preserves the holiness of these spaces. In the liturgical traditions of various religious communities, Uriel's guardianship is invoked at moments of particular solemnity and significance. His presence is requested when communities gather for the most sacred rituals, when the boundary between the ordinary and the holy becomes especially thin. The mystical understanding of Uriel's guardianship reveals that every threshold in spiritual life is under his protection. The moment when a seeker first turns toward the divine, the instant when prayer becomes true communion, the transition from intellectual understanding to heart knowledge, all of these passages fall under his watchful care. His guardianship is not static, but dynamic, adapting to the needs of each soul and each situation. For some, his fire appears as gentle warmth that slowly burns away resistance to divine love. For others, it manifests as brilliant illumination that suddenly reveals truth that had long been hidden. For still others, it comes as purifying flame that cleanses the soul of everything that prevents full surrender to divine will. The tradition of Uriel as guardian also encompasses his role in protecting divine secrets from those who are not ready to receive them. Just as he guards the gates of Eden and the underworld, he also guards the gates of wisdom, ensuring that spiritual knowledge is revealed only to those who have prepared themselves through proper discipline and devotion. This aspect of his guardianship explains why Uriel appears so often in mystical literature as the angel who tests seekers before revealing deeper truths. His fire serves as both protection and preparation, burning away the pride and presumption that would make spiritual knowledge dangerous rather than beneficial. The image of Uriel as guardian reminds us that spiritual progress requires both protection and purification. The gates he guards are not arbitrary barriers, but necessary thresholds that ensure the soul's readiness for each new level of divine encounter. His presence at these gates is a sign of divine mercy, ensuring that no soul is exposed to more truth than it can safely bear. In the quiet hours when seekers feel themselves standing at the threshold of new understanding, when the familiar gives way to the unknown, when the soul trembles on the edge of transformation, there stands Uriel with his flaming sword turned to discern the readiness of each heart. His guardianship ensures that every passage through the gates of spiritual experience becomes an opportunity for deeper purification and greater illumination. The gates he guards are ultimately gates of love, thresholds that protect not by excluding, but by preparing, not by forbidding, but by ensuring readiness. In his role as guardian, Uriel embodies the divine wisdom that knows exactly when each soul is ready for the next step in its journey home to the heart of divine love. The angel of fire speaks a language older than words, older than thought itself. It dances with meanings that touch the deepest places in the human soul, awakening memories of warmth and light that seem to come from somewhere beyond ordinary experience. And when ancient traditions speak of Uriel as the angel of fire, they are drawing upon this primal language to communicate truths that ordinary speech cannot contain. But Uriel's fire is not the chaotic flame of earthly combustion. It is sacred fire, divine fire, the very essence of spiritual illumination, made manifest in forms that human consciousness can perceive and receive. To understand Uriel as the angel of fire is to enter into one of the most profound mysteries of spiritual existence, the nature of divine love as both creative and transformative power. The earliest descriptions of Uriel's fiery nature speak of him as the angel whose very presence radiates the warmth and light of divine love. When he appears to human consciousness, whether in vision or in the subtle movements of spiritual awareness, he brings with him the unmistakable sense of standing in the presence of sacred flame. This fire burns without consuming, illuminates without blinding, warms without overwhelming. It is the fire that burned in the bush before Moses, the flame that danced upon the heads of the apostles at Pentecost, the radiance that surrounds all true encounters with divine presence. Uriel carries this fire not as a tool or weapon, but as the very essence of his being. Ancient texts describe the fire of Uriel as having multiple aspects, each reflecting a different dimension of divine activity in creation. There is the fire of purification, which burns away everything in the soul that is incompatible with divine love. This is not the harsh fire of punishment, but the gentle flame of healing, which removes spiritual impurities with the same precision that earthly fire separates pure metal from dross. Then there is the fire of illumination, which reveals truth with sudden brilliance or gradual dawning. This fire lights up the dark corners of human understanding, dispelling the shadows of ignorance and confusion that prevent clear sight of spiritual reality. Under the influence of this fire, seekers find themselves suddenly understanding truths that had long remained hidden, seeing connections that transform their entire perspective on existence. The fire of inspiration burns through Uriel's ministry as well, kindling the spark of divine creativity in human hearts. This is the flame that ignites prophetic vision, that moves poets to write of divine beauty, that inspires mystics to reach beyond the boundaries of ordinary consciousness. It is the fire that burns in the hearts of all who feel called to serve divine purposes in the world. Perhaps most mysteriously, there is the fire of transformation, which has the power to change the very nature of what it touches. This fire does not destroy but transmutes, taking what is base and making it noble, taking what is broken and making it whole. Under the influence of this transformative fire, souls find themselves becoming more than they ever imagined possible. The tradition of Uriel as fire-bearer connects him to solar symbolism in ways that illuminate his role in spiritual development. He is associated with the sun not merely as a source of physical light and warmth, but as the celestial symbol of divine consciousness illuminating creation. Just as the sun makes physical sight possible, Uriel's fire makes spiritual sight possible. The daily journey of the sun across the sky becomes, in this symbolic framework, an image of the soul's journey toward divine illumination. The sun rises in darkness, struggles through the challenges of the day, and sets in the west, Uriel's traditional direction, only to be reborn the next morning with renewed radiance. This cycle mirrors the spiritual process of death and rebirth, of purification and renewal that Uriel's fire facilitates in human souls. But Uriel's solar connection goes deeper than mere symbolism. Ancient traditions speak of him as the angel who governs the spiritual principles that the sun represents in the physical world. He is the celestial intelligence behind solar radiance, the angelic consciousness that directs the sun's life-giving energy toward the fulfillment of divine purposes. This connection explains why Uriel is often depicted with symbols of the sun, rays of light emanating from his head, solar disks surrounding his form, flames that burn with the golden radiance of perfect daylight. These images attempt to capture something of his essential nature as a being of pure spiritual illumination. The fire that Uriel carries is also the fire of divine judgment, but this judgment must be understood in its deepest spiritual sense. It is not the arbitrary punishment of an angry deity, but the natural consequence of spiritual law, the way reality itself responds to truth and falsehood. Uriel's fire reveals things as they truly are, stripping away all pretense and illusion to expose the spiritual reality that lies beneath surface appearances. Under the influence of this revealing fire, souls can no longer hide from the truth of their own condition. Every thought, every motive, every hidden desire stands exposed in the blazing light of divine awareness. But this exposure is not meant to condemn, but to liberate, not to shame, but to illuminate the path toward healing and transformation. The fire of Uriel also burns in the human heart as the flame of divine love awakened to consciousness. When souls touch the reality of divine love through prayer, meditation, or selfless service, they experience something of Uriel's fire burning within their own being. This inner fire becomes the source of spiritual warmth and light that can illuminate not only their own path, but the paths of others as well. Mystical traditions speak of advanced souls as becoming transparent to Uriel's fire, allowing the divine flame to burn through them without obstruction. These illuminated beings become channels for the same purifying, illuminating, inspiring, and transforming fire that Uriel himself embodies. They become, in effect, earthly extensions of his heavenly ministry. The fire that burns through Uriel's presence is ultimately the fire of divine love itself, love in its most active and dynamic form. It is love as creative power, love as healing force, love as illuminating wisdom, love as transforming grace. To encounter Uriel is to touch this fire directly, to feel the warmth of divine love burning away everything that separates the soul from its divine source. In the stillness of deep prayer, in the silence of contemplative awareness, in the moment soul feels itself touched by something infinitely greater than ordinary human experience, there burns the gentle fire of Uriel's presence. It is the fire that lights the way home, the flame that burns eternal in the sanctuary of the heart, the radiance that reveals the face of divine love shining through all creation. Uriel and the deluge water rises slowly at first, seeping through the foundations of the familiar world, gathering in places where it has never gathered before. Then comes the deluge, not merely rain, but the opening of cosmic floodgates, the release of waters that have been held back since the beginning of time. This is the great flood of ancient memory, the divine cleansing that reset the spiritual course of human history. And in its unfolding, we find Uriel playing a role both terrible and compassionate. The story of the flood appears in the mythologies of cultures around the world, but it is in the Hebrew tradition and its expansions that we see most clearly how this cosmic event served as an expression of divine justice, tempered by divine mercy. The corruption that had spread through the earth after the rebellion of the Watchers had reached such proportions that creation itself seemed in danger of losing its divine purpose entirely. In this context, the flood was not arbitrary punishment, but spiritual necessity, a way of preserving the possibility of redemption by removing the sources of corruption that threatened to make such redemption impossible. And Uriel, as the angel of divine fire and purification, played a crucial role in both the planning and execution of this cosmic intervention. The Book of Enoch tells us that it was the four great archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, who brought the crisis of earthly corruption before the divine throne. They had watched with growing alarm as the rebellion of the Watchers spread its influence through human society, introducing violence, deception, and spiritual confusion into a world that had been created for harmony and peace. Each of the archangels was given a specific role in the divine response to this crisis. Gabriel was sent to warn Noah of the coming flood, appearing to him in dreams and visions that gradually revealed the scope of divine intention. Raphael was charged with binding the chief of the fallen Watchers. Michael was given the responsibility of restraining the corrupted angels who had introduced forbidden knowledge into human society. Uriel's role was perhaps the most complex and mysterious of all. He was tasked with overseeing the spiritual dimensions of the flood, ensuring that the divine intention of purification was accomplished, while preserving the possibility of renewal for those who remained faithful to divine will. Ancient traditions suggest that Uriel's involvement in the flood began long before the first drops of rain began to fall. As the angel of divine fire and wisdom, he was involved in the careful planning that would ensure the flood served its intended purpose of spiritual cleansing, rather than mere destruction. The texts speak of Uriel appearing to Noah in a series of visions that helped the righteous patriarch understand not just what was coming, but why it was necessary. These were not the dramatic announcements that we might expect from apocalyptic literature, but gentle, patient teachings that helped Noah see the flood in its proper spiritual context. Through Uriel's instruction, Noah came to understand that the coming deluge was not divine anger unleashed without restraint, but divine love expressing itself through the difficult work of spiritual surgery. Just as a physician might need to cut away diseased tissue to preserve the health of the whole body, divine providence was preparing to remove the sources of spiritual corruption to preserve the possibility of human redemption. Uriel's fire played a crucial role in this spiritual surgery. Even as the physical waters rose to cleanse the earth of its corruption, the angel's purifying flame worked on subtler levels to ensure that the spiritual contamination introduced by the fallen watchers would not survive the flood. His fire burned through the invisible networks of corruption that had spread through human consciousness, cauterizing spiritual wounds and preparing the ground for a fresh start. The tradition also speaks of Uriel's role in protecting Noah and his family during the flood itself. While they were physically safe within the ark that divine guidance had instructed them to build, they were exposed to spiritual dangers that were perhaps even more threatening than the rising waters outside. The psychic atmosphere of a world in the process of divine judgment would have been filled with the despairing cries of those who were perishing, the rage of the fallen angels who saw their corruption being washed away, the chaotic energies released by the breakdown of cosmic order. In this spiritual maelstrom, Uriel's presence provided a sanctuary of divine peace and protection. Ancient texts describe Uriel as creating a circle of sacred fire around the ark, a spiritual barrier that preserved those within from the psychic turbulence surrounding them. This fire was not visible to physical sight, but burned brightly in the realm of spiritual vision, creating a zone of divine order within the cosmic chaos of judgment and renewal. But perhaps Uriel's most important role during the flood was as a guide for the souls of those who perished in the waters. The tradition suggests that even those who were physically destroyed in the flood were given opportunities for spiritual learning and growth through Uriel's ministry. His fire illuminated their spiritual condition with perfect clarity, helping them understand the consequences of their choices and preparing them for whatever form of existence awaited them beyond physical death. This aspect of Uriel's ministry reveals the profound mercy that operated even within the apparent severity of divine judgment. The flood was not merely retribution, but opportunity, a chance for souls to encounter divine truth with unprecedented clarity and to make choices about their spiritual future based on complete understanding of the stakes involved. As the waters began to recede and Noah's Ark came to rest upon Mount Ararat, Uriel's role shifted from protection during the crisis to guidance for the renewal that would follow. The earth that emerged from beneath the floodwaters was physically cleansed, but spiritually virgin territory, ready for a fresh start in the relationship between heaven and earth. Tradition tells us that Uriel was instrumental in helping Noah and his descendants understand how to live in this renewed world. The angel provided guidance on maintaining the spiritual purity that the flood had established, on avoiding the mistakes that had led to the previous corruption, on building human society in ways that would honor rather than violate divine will. The rainbow that appeared as a sign of divine covenant after the flood is sometimes associated with Uriel's continuing presence in the renewed world. Just as his fire had purified creation through the agency of water, now his light would serve as a constant reminder of divine faithfulness and the possibility of redemption. In the story of Uriel and the deluge, we see the angel of divine fire serving as an agent of both judgment and mercy, destruction and renewal. His involvement in this cosmic event reveals the complex nature of divine love, a love so complete that it will even resort to apparent severity to preserve the possibility of ultimate healing and restoration. The flood becomes, in this understanding, not the story of divine anger, but the story of divine surgery, and we that performed with infinite skill and compassion to remove spiritual cancer and restore the possibility of health to creation. And Uriel stands at the center of this story as the skilled surgeon of souls, wielding the scalpel of divine fire with perfect precision and infinite love. Uriel in ancient mysticism. In the hidden chambers of ancient temples, where incense burned eternal and scribes labored over texts that few would ever read, a different kind of spiritual seeking was taking shape. This was the world of Jewish mysticism, a realm of contemplative practice and visionary experience that would nurture some of the most profound spiritual insights in human history. And in this world of mystical seeking, Uriel emerged as one of the most important and beloved guides. The roots of Jewish mysticism stretch back to the earliest biblical periods, but it was during the centuries following the destruction of the Second Temple that these contemplative traditions began to flower with particular richness. Faced with the loss of the central institution of their religious life, Jewish seekers turned inward, developing practices of prayer, meditation, and visionary experience that could provide direct encounter with divine reality. In this context, angels took on new significance as mediators between the infinite God and finite human consciousness. They became not just messengers or servants, but teachers and guides who could lead sincere seekers into direct experience of divine truth. Among these angelic teachers, Uriel held a special place as the angel of divine wisdom and illumination. The earliest mystical texts speak of Uriel as the angel who appears to contemplatives in the deep stages of meditative practice, when ordinary consciousness has been stilled and the soul becomes receptive to subtler forms of divine communication. Unlike the dramatic appearances recorded in apocalyptic literature, these mystical encounters with Uriel are typically gentle and gradual, unfolding with the natural rhythm of deepening spiritual awareness. Contemplatives describe meeting Uriel in what they call the Palace of Flames, a spiritual realm that exists at the intersection of human consciousness and divine reality. This palace is not a physical place, but a state of awareness in which the soul becomes transparent to divine fire, allowing Uriel's illuminating presence to burn away the veils that normally obscure spiritual vision. In these encounters, Uriel appears not as an external being, but as the soul's own deepest wisdom awakened to divine consciousness. He speaks without words, teaches without concepts, revealing truth through direct transmission of understanding. His fire burns within the contemplative's own heart, kindling insights that transform not just knowledge, but the very capacity for spiritual perception. The mystical tradition speaks of Uriel as the angel who governs the Sephira of Binah in the Kabbalistic tree of life, the divine attribute of understanding or intuitive wisdom. In this role, he serves as the channel through which divine knowledge flows from its source in the infinite into forms that finite consciousness can receive and integrate. This connection to Binah reveals Uriel's function as the angel of contemplative understanding, the form of knowledge that comes not through rational analysis but through direct spiritual insight. He presides over those moments in contemplative practice when suddenly everything becomes clear, when the patterns that connect all things are revealed in flashes of illuminating fire. Ancient mystical texts describe specific practices associated with invoking Uriel's guidance and protection. These include visualizations in which contemplatives imagine themselves surrounded by sacred fire, breathing exercises that kindle the flame of divine love within the heart, and forms of prayer that call upon Uriel's assistance in penetrating the mysteries of divine truth. One particularly beautiful tradition speaks of Uriel as the angel who teaches souls how to read the book of creation, the divine scripture, written in the very structure of reality itself. Under his guidance, contemplatives learn to see the hand of divine artistry in every aspect of existence, from the dance of galaxies to the whisper of wind through leaves. This teaching goes far beyond intellectual understanding to encompass a form of mystical literacy that allows souls to perceive the divine meaning embedded in all phenomena. Every encounter becomes a sacred text, every experience a verse in the eternal poem of divine love. Uriel's fire burns away the cataracts of spiritual blindness that prevent ordinary consciousness from perceiving this hidden scripture. The tradition also speaks of Uriel's role in what mystics call the dark night of the soul, those periods in spiritual development when all familiar supports fall away and the seeker feels abandoned in spiritual darkness. During these difficult passages, Uriel's presence becomes especially important, though it may be experienced more as absence than presence. In these dark periods, Uriel's fire burns so purely that it becomes invisible to ordinary spiritual perception, working changes in the depths of the soul that are only recognized in retrospect. Contemplatives learn to trust this hidden fire even when they cannot feel its warmth, understanding that the deepest purification often happens in apparent silence and emptiness. Advanced practitioners speak of entering into what they call Uriel's chamber, a state of consciousness in which the soul becomes completely transparent to divine fire, no longer experiencing itself as separate from the illuminating flame that burns through all creation. In this state, the contemplative becomes a living flame of divine love, able to kindle the same fire in other hearts through the sheer radiance of their presence. The mystical understanding of Uriel also encompasses his role as guardian of sacred time, those moments when the boundary between the ordinary and the eternal becomes thin enough to step through. He presides over the Sabbath as a weekly taste of eternity, over the high holy days as opportunities for profound spiritual renewal, over the daily periods of prayer as gateways into divine presence. In the rhythm of sacred time, Uriel's fire burns with different intensities and qualities, offering contemplatives multiple opportunities to encounter divine truth in forms appropriate to their level of spiritual development. His presence transforms ordinary time into kairos, time filled with divine meaning and possibility. Perhaps most importantly, the mystical tradition presents Uriel as the angel of integration, the divine intelligence who helps contemplatives bring their spiritual insights into practical expression in daily life. His fire not only illuminates truth, but provides the energy needed to embody that truth in concrete acts of love and service. This integration is seen as the ultimate goal of mystical practice, not escape from the world, but transformation of the world through souls that have become transparent to divine light. Uriel's guidance ensures that contemplative insight ripens into compassionate action, that the fire of divine love kindled in the heart spreads to warm and illuminate the larger human community. In the quiet hours when mystics withdraw from the noise of daily life to seek communion with divine reality, in the moments when prayer deepens into wordless contemplation, in the experiences of sudden illumination that transform understanding forever, there burns the gentle fire of Uriel's presence. He remains the faithful guide of all who seek to know God, not just through concepts, but through direct experience of divine love burning in the sanctuary of the awakened heart. Uriel in the Apocalypse. At the edge of time, where the familiar world dissolves into the mystery of ultimate things, ancient seers caught glimpses of cosmic transformation that would reshape reality itself. These apocalyptic visions, born from centuries of suffering and hope, painted pictures of endings that were also beginnings, of judgment that was also redemption. And standing at the heart of these ultimate revelations, we find Uriel in one of his most profound and mysterious roles. The word apocalypse means unveiling, revelation, the drawing back of veils that normally hide spiritual reality from ordinary sight. In the literature of apocalyptic vision, Uriel appears as the angel of ultimate disclosure, the divine messenger who reveals the deepest patterns of cosmic purpose and divine intention. Unlike his appearances in other contexts, where his fire burns gently and his wisdom unfolds gradually, Uriel's apocalyptic manifestations carry the intensity of final revelation. Here he appears as the angel who stands at the intersection of time and eternity, translating divine intentions that span cosmic ages into forms that human consciousness can receive and understand. The second book of Esdras, one of the most important apocalyptic texts in the Jewish tradition, presents Uriel as the primary angelic interpreter of end-time visions. In this role, he appears to the prophet Ezra during a period of profound spiritual crisis, when the destruction of Jerusalem and the exile of the Jewish people had shattered conventional understanding of divine providence. Ezra's questions are the questions that arise in every human heart when confronted with inexplicable suffering. If God is just, why do the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper? If God loves creation, why does evil seem to triumph so often? If divine promises are trustworthy, why do they seem so long delayed in their fulfillment? Uriel's responses to these anguished questions reveal a different dimension of his angelic ministry. Here he appears not primarily as the gentle teacher of mystical contemplatives, but as the cosmic interpreter who can place human suffering within the vast context of divine purpose, working itself out across ages. His apocalyptic teaching begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. Human beings, Uriel explains, naturally see reality from their limited viewpoint within time and space. But divine purpose operates according to patterns that span cosmic cycles, weaving meanings that only become apparent when viewed from the perspective of eternity. The angel uses vivid metaphors to help Ezra understand this cosmic perspective. He speaks of the present age as a woman in labor, groaning with the pain of bringing forth something new. The suffering that seems so meaningless from a human perspective is revealed as the birth pangs of a new creation, the necessary transition between what has been and what is yet to come. Uriel's apocalyptic fire burns with particular intensity as he reveals visions of the end times. But these are not arbitrary scenes of destruction designed to terrify or punish. They are carefully orchestrated revelations of justice, moments when the hidden spiritual realities that have been operating throughout history finally become visible to all creation. In these visions, Uriel appears as the angel who measures and weighs, who separates and discerns with perfect divine accuracy. His fire reveals the true spiritual condition of every soul, burning away all pretense and self-deception to expose the choices that each being has made in response to divine love. But even in these scenes of cosmic judgment, Uriel's essential nature as the angel of wisdom and compassion shines through. The separation he oversees is not arbitrary punishment, but the natural consequence of spiritual law, the way reality itself responds to the fundamental choice between love and selfishness that every conscious being must make. The apocalyptic tradition also presents Uriel as the angel who oversees the resurrection of the dead, the cosmic moment when all souls are restored to conscious existence to face the ultimate revelation of divine truth. In this role, his fire serves as the agent of restoration, rekindling the flame of consciousness in souls that have passed through the sleep of death. This resurrection is not merely the restoration of previous existence, but the revelation of each soul's true nature, purified of all the limitations and distortions that characterized earthly life. Under Uriel's guidance, souls awaken to perfect clarity about their own spiritual condition and the choices that have shaped their eternal destiny. Perhaps most mysteriously, Uriel appears in apocalyptic literature as the angel who reveals the new creation that will emerge from the ashes of the old. His visions show not just the end of the current cosmic order, but the beginning of something unprecedented, a reality in which the barrier between heaven and earth has been permanently removed. In these revelations of ultimate renewal, Uriel's fire takes on its most transformative qualities. This is the fire that not only purifies, but recreates, that burns away not just corruption, but all the limitations that have prevented creation from fully expressing divine beauty and love. The new heaven and new earth that Uriel reveals are not simply improved versions of current reality, but qualitatively different states of existence in which divine love flows without obstruction through every aspect of creation. His apocalyptic visions offer glimpses of cosmic harmony, in which every being finds its perfect place in the vast symphony of divine praise. Central to Uriel's apocalyptic ministry is his role as the revealer of divine timing. Throughout the literature of end-time visions, he appears as the angel who understands the cosmic calendar, who knows the appointed seasons for divine intervention in history. This knowledge of divine timing allows Uriel to comfort those who wonder why divine justice seems so long delayed. He reveals that divine patience is not divine indifference, but divine wisdom, allowing maximum opportunity for repentance and spiritual growth before the final consummation of all things. The apocalyptic Uriel also serves as a bridge between present suffering and ultimate hope. His revelations transform current pain from meaningless tragedy into meaningful participation in cosmic transformation. He shows how every act of faith, every choice for love over fear, every moment of perseverance in the face of difficulty contributes to the great work of universal redemption. In the quiet moments when believers feel overwhelmed by the apparent triumph of evil in the world, when injustice seems to reign unchallenged, when divine promises feel distant and uncertain, Uriel's apocalyptic fire burns as a reminder that current appearances are not ultimate reality. His presence in apocalyptic literature assures seekers that divine love has not abandoned creation, but is working through even the darkest circumstances to bring about the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, love over fear, truth over deception. The end he reveals is not destruction, but transformation, not punishment, but purification, not loss, but the finding of everything that has ever truly mattered. In the great unveiling that stands at the end of time, Uriel appears as the angel of ultimate revelation, the divine flame that illuminates the final meaning of existence and reveals the perfect love that has been working through all things from the beginning to bring creation home to its divine source. The lost canon's sacred texts have always been collections of choices. Someone decided what belonged and what didn't. In the early centuries of Christianity, church leaders gathered to make these decisions. They looked at hundreds of writings. Some made it into the Bible, others were set aside. Uriel's story lived in those other books, the ones that didn't make the final cut. These writings told of his wisdom, his fire, his role in guiding souls, but they weren't chosen for the official collection. Why did this happen? The reasons are gentler than you might think. The early church wanted unity. They needed texts that all communities could accept, books that told clear, consistent stories. Uriel appeared in writings that were complex. They spoke of multiple heavens, detailed angel hierarchies, and mystical visions. These ideas felt too intricate for everyday believers. Church fathers worried about confusion. If every community had different angel stories, would the faith splinter? They chose simpler narratives, 4 archangels instead of 7, clear roles instead of mysterious ones. Gabriel brought messages, Michael fought battles, Raphael brought healing. These were easy to understand. Uriel's fire was harder to explain. His wisdom seemed too vast, too cosmic. His role in judgment felt overwhelming. So his stories were gently moved aside, not destroyed, but not promoted either. They lived in the margins, in the whispered tales of mystics and scholars. The Book of Enoch, where Uriel shines brightest, faced this fate. Jewish communities treasured it for centuries. Early Christians quoted from it. But as the church organized, it became too exotic, too filled with strange cosmology and angel lore. It was labeled apocryphal, hidden, secret, not for everyone. This wasn't malice, it was caution. Church leaders wanted to protect people from confusion. They thought simple stories were safer than complex ones. They feared that too much angel lore might distract from the central message of love and salvation. But books have their own life. Uriel's stories didn't vanish. They lived in monasteries, copied by careful hands. Scholars studied them in quiet libraries. Mystics meditated on them in hidden chambers. The angel of fire continued to burn, even if more softly. Different regions made different choices. Ethiopian Christians kept the Book of Enoch in their Bible. Eastern Orthodox traditions remembered Uriel in their prayers. Western Christianity was stricter, but even there, his image appeared on cathedral walls and in illuminated manuscripts. The decision makers were human. They did their best with incomplete information. They couldn't see the future, couldn't know how these choices would echo through centuries. They made decisions based on their time, their concerns, their understanding of what people needed. Sometimes exclusion created a lure. The hidden often becomes more fascinating than the revealed. Uriel's absence from the main texts made his story more intriguing. Artists painted him. Poets wrote about him. Mystics sought his guidance. The forgotten angel found new life in imagination. The process wasn't sudden. Centuries passed as texts were sorted, discussed, debated. Uriel's status shifted slowly. One generation treasured his stories. The next questioned them. Another generation forgot them entirely. Then someone would rediscover an old manuscript and remember. Translation played a role too. As texts moved from Hebrew to Greek to Latin, some nuances disappeared. Uriel's complex nature became harder to capture in new languages. His fire dimmed in translation. His wisdom seemed less clear when filtered through different words. Politics mattered as well. Different Christian communities had different favorites. Some loved mystical texts, others preferred practical ones. The winners wrote the final list. The losers saw their beloved books set aside. Uriel was caught in these gentle struggles, but truth has persistence. Even excluded stories find ways to survive. They whisper through art, through poetry, through the dreams of believers. Uriel's fire never truly went out. It just burned in different places, warmed different hearts, lit different paths. The scholars who made these choices weren't villains. They were trying to build something lasting. They wanted texts that would unite rather than divide. They couldn't know that their careful selections would leave some believers hungry for the stories that were set aside. Modern discoveries have brought some of these texts back to light. Ancient manuscripts found in caves and buried libraries. Scholars can now read what was lost. They can trace how these decisions shaped religious thought. They can see both the wisdom and the loss in these old choices. Uriel stands as a symbol of this complex history. An angel honored for centuries, then gently forgotten, then slowly remembered again. His story shows how sacred traditions grow and change, how human choices shape divine narratives, how the excluded can find new life in unexpected places. The canon was closed, but hearts remained open, and in those open hearts, the angel of fire continued to dwell, patient and eternal, waiting for his time to return to the light where he belonged. Uriel in Christian tradition. Christianity embraced Uriel slowly, quietly, like dawn creeping across a sleeping landscape. Even though his name didn't appear in the accepted Bible, his presence lingered in the edges of Christian thought. Early believers had grown up with stories of this fiery angel. They couldn't simply forget him when new rules were made. The first Christian centuries were times of blending. Old traditions met new teachings. Jewish angel lore mixed with Christian theology. Uriel found himself caught in this gentle transformation. He wasn't officially recognized, but he wasn't entirely forgotten either. Early Christian writers mentioned him carefully. They knew his stories, but wrote about him with caution. Some called him the fourth archangel, standing alongside Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. Others described him as a powerful spirit without using his name directly. They found ways to honor him while staying within acceptable bounds. Art told a different story. Christian artists painted Uriel on church walls and in sacred books. They showed him with his traditional symbols: fire, scrolls, the light of wisdom. Cathedral builders carved his image in stone. These weren't official endorsements, but they were acts of remembrance. The angel lived on in beauty even when doctrine was uncertain. The Eastern Orthodox Church was more welcoming. They remembered Uriel in their prayers and liturgies. Icons showed him among the holy angels. Their tradition was older, closer to the original sources. They felt less pressure to exclude the angel of fire from their worship. In the West, things were more complicated. The Roman Church was stricter about which angels to honor. They worried about too much attention to heavenly beings. They wanted focus on Christ, not on elaborate angel hierarchies. Uriel became a whispered name, spoken in private devotions rather than public prayers. Monasteries became refuges for his memory. Monks copied ancient texts that told his stories. They painted him in their illuminated manuscripts. They meditated on his role as guardian and teacher. In these quiet places, far from theological debates, Uriel's flame continued to burn. The Middle Ages brought new interest in angels. Christians faced plagues, wars, and uncertainty. They wanted heavenly protectors. Angel devotion grew stronger. Uriel's reputation as a guardian made him attractive to worried believers. They asked for his protection even if their priests weren't sure they should. Mystery plays performed in town squares sometimes featured Uriel. Actors portrayed him as the angel who guarded Eden's gate. Audiences loved these dramatic presentations. They brought Bible stories to life in ways that sermons couldn't match. Through theater, Uriel reached people who might never read theological texts. Folk traditions preserved his memory differently. Country people told stories about a fiery angel who helped during disasters. They said he warned of floods and protected crops from storms. These weren't official teachings, but they kept his name alive in rural communities. Simple faith often preserved what formal doctrine had set aside. The Reformation brought new complexities. Protestant reformers were even more cautious about angel veneration. They worried it took attention away from Christ. But they couldn't erase centuries of tradition entirely. Uriel appeared in their art and poetry, even if he was missing from their official prayers. Catholic mystical traditions embraced him more warmly. Saints and visionaries reported encounters with the angel of fire. They described his wisdom and his gentle power. These personal revelations weren't doctrine, but they influenced private devotions. Uriel lived in the hearts of believers who sought deeper spiritual experiences. Renaissance artists rediscovered his appeal. They painted him in scenes of the Annunciation, standing with the other archangels. They showed him in depictions of divine judgment, carrying scrolls of wisdom. Art historians can trace his growing presence in religious paintings of this period. Beauty opened doors that theology had closed. Different regions developed their own relationships with Uriel. Spanish Christians honored him as a protector against plague. French believers saw him as a guardian of learning. English poets wrote about his role in paradise. Each culture found aspects of his character that spoke to their needs. Music carried his memory too. Composers wrote hymns that mentioned his name. Choirs sang ancient songs that praised the fiery angel. These musical traditions preserved stories that might otherwise have been lost. Melody succeeded where doctrine had failed. The printing press changed everything. Ancient texts became available to more readers. People could study the Book of Enoch and other writings that told Uriel's story. Private reading allowed personal devotion to flourish beyond official oversight. The angel found new followers among educated believers. Modern Christianity has grown more accepting of Uriel's legacy. Scholars study his history without controversy. Artists depict him freely. Even conservative traditions acknowledge his role in ancient texts. The angel who was once excluded has found quiet acceptance in contemporary faith. His story in Christian tradition shows how living faith adapts and grows. Official decisions matter, but they don't control everything. Hearts hold memories that outlast rules, and sometimes what was once set aside finds its way back home, carried by the persistent love of believers who never forgot. Uriel and the Garden of Eden. Eden lives in every human heart as a memory of perfection lost. That first garden where innocence bloomed eternal, where harmony was the only song creation knew. And when that paradise was broken by choice, by curiosity, by the simple human desire to know more than we were meant to know, someone had to guard what remained. Tradition places Uriel at Eden's eastern gate, standing with his flaming sword. Not Michael the warrior, not Gabriel the messenger, but Uriel, the angel of divine fire and wisdom. The choice makes perfect sense when you consider what he was guarding. Not just a place, but a state of being. Not just trees and rivers, but the very possibility of return. The sword he carries isn't meant for violence. It's made of the same fire that burns within him, the flame that illuminates without destroying, that purifies without consuming. This sword turns every way, the ancient text tells us. It moves like thought itself, like the dance of divine justice, blocking every path that leads backward to what was lost. Picture that scene in the gentle light of dawn. Adam and Eve walking away from everything they had known, their feet touching earth that suddenly felt foreign. Behind them, the angel of fire takes his post. His presence is both terrible and merciful. Terrible because return is now impossible. Merciful because some things must remain sacred. Is left untouched by the consequences of choice. Uriel doesn't guard Eden out of anger. He stands there out of love. The garden must remain pure for the day when humanity might be ready to return. Not as innocents who know nothing, but as souls who have learned everything and chosen love anyway. The angel keeps paradise safe for that distant possibility. Centuries pass like seasons in the angel's sight. Civilizations rise and fall beyond Eden's borders. Humans build cities, fight wars, discover arts and sciences. They create beauty and ugliness in equal measure. Through it all, Uriel watches. He sees the spark of divinity that still glows in human hearts, even after the fall. Some nights, travelers claim they've seen a distant glow in the desert places where Eden might still stand. A soft light that doesn't flicker like fire, doesn't move like lamplight. It simply is, constant and eternal. Those who've glimpsed it say they felt homesick for a place they'd never been, sad for a loss they couldn't name. The angel's vigil isn't lonely. Other heavenly beings visit him, bringing news from the world beyond the garden. They tell him of Noah's righteousness, of Abraham's faith, of Moses' encounter with divine fire on the mountain. Each story brings hope that humans might someday be ready for return. Uriel studies each visitor to his realm with gentle eyes. He sees the longing in their hearts, the unnamed hunger that drives them to seek what was lost. Some come close to understanding. Mystics and poets, children and dreamers, they sense something beyond the veil of ordinary existence. But understanding isn't enough. Eden requires transformation. The garden itself remains unchanged. Time touches everything except this one place. The trees still grow, heavy with fruit that knows no season. The rivers still flow clear and sweet. Animals that have forgotten fear still wander peacefully among flowers that never fade. Paradise waits, patient as the angel who guards it. Other traditions tell different stories about this guardian. Some say he teaches those who seek wisdom, sharing secrets of creation with souls ready to receive them. Others claim he appears to the dying, showing them glimpses of the peace that awaits beyond earthly suffering. All agree his presence brings both awe and comfort. The symbolism runs deeper than simple guardianship. Uriel at Eden's gate represents the threshold between innocence and experience. He stands at the boundary between what we were and what we might become. His flaming sword is the barrier we must cross within ourselves, the divine fire that burns away everything false until only truth remains. Medieval mystics meditated on this image for hours. They saw in Uriel's vigil their own spiritual journey. The return to Eden wasn't a physical place, but a state of consciousness. The angel's sword wasn't an obstacle, but a tool for purification. The flame that seemed to bar the way was actually the light that showed the path home. Artists painted this scene with tender reverence. They showed Uriel not as a stern warrior, but as a compassionate guardian. His face reflects both strength and sorrow. He knows the pain of separation, understands the cost of the choice that led to exile. Yet he also holds hope for eventual reunion. The eastern gate faces the dawn. Every morning, light streams through that entrance, touching the angel's golden wings. It's a daily reminder that darkness isn't permanent, that every end contains the seed of new beginning. Eden waits for the dawn when its children will be ready to return. Some theologians wondered why the other angels weren't chosen for this task. Gabriel might have delivered messages of hope to the exiled. Michael could have fought the forces that led to the fall. Raphael might have healed the wound that separation caused. But Uriel was perfect for this duty. He represents the divine wisdom that knows when to forbid and when to welcome, when to separate and when to unite. His vigil continues today, in this moment, as you hear these words. Somewhere beyond the maps we draw, beyond the cities we build, the angel of fire keeps watch over paradise. His flame burns steady and eternal, waiting for the day when wisdom and innocence will meet again, when choice and obedience will be one, when the eastern gate will finally swing open to welcome the children home. The angel of repentance. Deep in the human heart lives a voice that whispers when we've wandered too far from who we're meant to be. That voice carries the gentle fire of Uriel, the angel who guides souls back toward the light they thought they'd lost forever. He doesn't come with judgment or harsh words. He arrives with a patient flame of understanding, showing us the way home to ourselves. Repentance isn't about punishment. It's about return. The word itself means to turn around, to face a new direction. Uriel specializes in these gentle turnings. He appears not to those who are perfect, but to those who know they're broken and want to be whole again. His fire doesn't destroy the sinner. It burns away everything that isn't truly them. Ancient texts describe him as the angel who brings divine mercy to earth. When souls cry out in genuine sorrow for their mistakes, Uriel hears their call. He descends on wings of flame, carrying scrolls that contain not condemnation but guidance. His light illuminates the path between regret and renewal, between sorrow and transformation. The fire he brings is unlike earthly flame. It doesn't hurt as it burns. Instead, it warms the places in our hearts that have grown cold with disappointment and shame. It melts the barriers we've built around our true selves. Under his gentle heat, the soul remembers what it felt like to be innocent, to be hopeful, to believe in second chances. Medieval mystics wrote about encounters with this aspect of Uriel. They described feeling his presence during their darkest moments of self-doubt. When they had lost faith in their own goodness, when the weight of their failures seemed too heavy to bear, a warm light would fill their cells. In that light, they found not answers, but better questions. Not excuses, but honest understanding. The angel of repentance works slowly, like dawn breaking over a sleeping city. He doesn't force sudden conversions or dramatic revelations. Instead, he plants seeds of awareness that grow gradually into full acceptance of what needs to change. His method is transformation through love, not fear. Children seem to understand this better than adults. They naturally turn toward forgiveness when they've made mistakes. They don't carry the heavy baggage of shame that adults collect over the years. In their easy return to joy after sorrow, we see how Uriel's fire is meant to work. Quick to burn, quick to warm, leaving no scars behind. Artistic traditions often show Uriel holding scales or scrolls. These aren't tools of judgment, but instruments of understanding. The scales don't weigh sins, but measure the sincerity of the heart that seeks to change. The scrolls contain not lists of rules, but maps for the journey back to grace. His role is teacher, not judge. The fire of repentance burns brightest in the moments we least expect it. A harsh word spoken in anger suddenly echoes back with new meaning. A small cruelty we thought no one noticed reveals itself as deeply seen. The lie we told so smoothly shows its true face. In these moments of recognition, Uriel's light shines through our own awareness. He appears in different ways to different souls. Some see him as a figure of overwhelming beauty, wings spread wide, flame dancing in his hands. Others experience him as a warm presence, a sense of being truly seen and completely accepted despite everything they've done wrong. His form matters less than his function, to kindle hope where despair has taken root. The angel understands the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. Uriel's fire burns away shame while honoring the truth that guilt reveals. He helps souls separate their actions from their identity, their mistakes from their worth. Repentance in his presence becomes a form of worship, not the groveling kind that seeks to appease anger, but the grateful kind that recognizes love. When we truly see how far we've wandered and how patiently we've been awaited, the turning back becomes natural, like a child running toward open arms. Some traditions connect Uriel's role as angel of repentance to his position at Eden's gate. The same fire that prevents return to innocence can kindle the transformation that leads to something better. Not the innocence of those who have never chosen this, but the deeper peace of those who have chosen wrongly and learned to choose again. The process he guides isn't always comfortable. Truth rarely is, especially truth about ourselves. But his presence makes the discomfort bearable. Like a skilled physician, he knows that some healing requires temporary pain. The fire that reveals our wounds is the same fire that will heal them. Modern souls often struggle with the concept of repentance. It sounds outdated, religious in ways that make contemporary minds uncomfortable. But strip away the formal language, and what remains is deeply human. The desire to make amends, the hope for fresh starts, the need to believe that we're more than the worst things we've done. Uriel offers a different model of change than the world usually provides. Not change through willpower or self-improvement, but change through surrender. Not fixing ourselves, but allowing ourselves to be transformed. His fire doesn't make us perfect, it makes us real. The angel of repentance reminds us that every ending contains a beginning. Every acknowledgement of failure opens the door to growth. Every genuine I'm sorry clears space for I'll try again. In his patient flame, we learn that the path forward leads through honesty, not around it. His gift to humanity is the knowledge that transformation is always possible. No matter how far we've fallen, how deep we've wandered, how lost we've become, the fire of return burns eternal. All we need is the willingness to turn toward its light and let it show us the way home. Uriel in the Renaissance. The Renaissance dawned like spring after a long winter, bringing light to minds that had hungered for beauty and truth. In this flowering of human creativity, forgotten angels stirred in ancient texts and emerged on canvas, in marble, in the soaring lines of poetry. Uriel, the angel of fire and wisdom, found his way back into the world through the hands of artists who saw in him everything their age celebrated. Florence buzzed with new ideas about heaven and earth. Scholars translated Greek texts that had been lost for centuries. They discovered Hebrew writings that told stories their grandparents had never heard. Among these recovered treasures were detailed accounts of Uriel's wisdom, his role in guiding prophets, his mastery over divine knowledge. Renaissance minds, hungry for learning, embraced these cosmic narratives. Artists began including Uriel in their religious paintings with increasing boldness. No longer hidden in manuscript margins, he stepped forward into full view. Raphael painted him alongside the other archangels in scenes of divine majesty. His red robes blazed with the fire of his nature. His youthful face combined strength with gentleness. Renaissance painters had rediscovered the beauty of the angelic realm. The printing press changed everything for Uriel's story. Books that had existed in only a few monastery libraries suddenly reached thousands of readers. The Book of Enoch, with its detailed accounts of Uriel's teachings, spread across Europe. Educated people could read for themselves about the angel who had shown Enoch the mysteries of heaven and earth. Humanist scholars were particularly drawn to Uriel's role as teacher and guide. They saw in him a divine patron of learning, an angel who valued wisdom above all else. Universities began invoking his name in prayers for understanding. Students sought his guidance before important examinations. The angel of fire became associated with the fire of intellectual passion. Poetry flourished in this period, and poets found rich material in Uriel's story. They wrote about his conversations with Enoch, his guardianship of Eden, his role in bringing divine messages to worthy souls. The Italian poet Tasso included him in epic verses about the cosmic battle between good and evil. English writers began weaving his name into their spiritual allegories. Architecture told its own story of Uriel's Renaissance revival. Cathedral builders, working on projects that spanned generations, began including his image in their stone carvings. His figure appeared on church facades, usually holding a book or scroll to represent his wisdom. These permanent installations declared his importance to anyone who had eyes to see. The Catholic Church watched these developments with mixed feelings. Officially, they maintained caution about excessive angel devotion, but they couldn't deny the beauty of the art being created or the genuine piety it inspired. Many bishops quietly allowed Uriel's image in their churches, reasoning that anything that drew people closer to the divine served a good purpose. Mystical traditions embraced Uriel with particular enthusiasm during this period. Contemplatives and visionaries reported encounters with the angel of fire in their prayers and meditations. They described his presence as a warm light that illuminated the soul's deepest questions. These personal revelations influenced private devotional practices across Europe. The Renaissance emphasis on individual experience opened new space for Uriel's influence. Medieval Christianity had focused on communal worship and official doctrine. Renaissance spirituality celebrated personal encounters with the divine. In this climate, angels like Uriel could flourish as guides for individual souls seeking their own path to God. Music began to carry Uriel's presence as well. Composers wrote masses and motets that included references to the four archangels, naming Uriel alongside his more familiar brothers. These musical works spread his reputation through courts and churches across the continent. Melody succeeded where theology sometimes failed, embedding his name in the hearts of listeners. The Protestant Reformation created new complexities for Uriel's growing influence. Protestant reformers were generally suspicious of elaborate angel hierarchies, seeing them as distractions from Christ-centered faith. But even they couldn't entirely escape the Renaissance fascination with these heavenly beings. Uriel appeared in Protestant art and literature, though more cautiously than in Catholic regions. Scientific discoveries of the Renaissance period seem to confirm ancient writings about Uriel's cosmic knowledge. Astronomers mapping the heavens found patterns that reminded them of angelic descriptions in texts like Enoch. The angel who had taught about stars and seasons suddenly seemed remarkably prescient to minds exploring the natural world. Women played a special role in preserving and promoting Uriel's memory during this period. Female mystics and visionaries often reported particularly vivid encounters with the angel of fire. Their spiritual writings, while not always widely circulated, influenced local devotional practices. Abbesses commissioned artwork featuring Uriel for their convents and churches. The Renaissance rediscovery of classical learning also influenced how people understood Uriel's nature. Scholars noted similarities between the angel of fire and ancient figures like Prometheus, who brought divine knowledge to humanity. This classical connection made Uriel seem less foreign to educated Renaissance minds, more like a familiar figure wearing new clothes. Trade routes brought new influences to European understanding of angels. Merchants and diplomats returned from Eastern lands with stories of how different cultures honored similar heavenly beings. These cross-cultural exchanges enriched European angelology, adding new dimensions to traditional stories about figures like Uriel. By the end of the Renaissance period, Uriel had secured a place in European culture that would endure for centuries. He might not have official theological status, but he had something perhaps more powerful, a place in the artistic and literary imagination of Western civilization. The angel of fire had found his way back into the light where he belonged. Uriel across cultures. Angels don't recognize the borders humans draw on maps. They move freely between cultures, taking new names and new forms, but carrying the same essential fire. Uriel's story spreads far beyond its Jewish and Christian origins, finding homes in traditions that might seem worlds apart, but share the same deep human hunger for divine guidance and protection. In Islamic tradition, angels carry different names, but similar purposes. While Uriel isn't directly mentioned in the Quran, Islamic angelology includes beings whose roles mirror his, perfectly. Israfil, the angel who will blow the trumpet on Judgment Day, shares Uriel's connection to divine fire and cosmic transformation. Some scholars see echoes of Uriel's teaching role in various Islamic angels who guide prophets and reveal hidden knowledge. The Sufi mystics of Islam developed particularly rich relationships with angelic guides. Their poetry speaks of fiery beings who appear in meditation, offering wisdom to souls seeking union with the divine. These angels of illumination bear striking similarities to Uriel's role as teacher and guide. The fire they bring is the same fire, not destruction but purification, not heat but light. Eastern Orthodox Christianity preserved Uriel's memory more faithfully than the Western Church. In Russian and Greek traditions, he appears in icons and liturgies alongside the other archangels. Orthodox believers pray to him for wisdom and protection. Their churches display his image with the traditional symbols, scrolls, flames, books of divine knowledge. Eastern Christianity kept alive what Western theology had set aside. Ethiopian Christianity went further, keeping the Book of Enoch in their biblical canon. Ethiopian Christians still read Uriel's stories as sacred scripture. They honor him in their churches and call upon his intercession in their prayers. In Ethiopian tradition, he remains fully part of the archangelic family, not a forgotten cousin, but a beloved brother. Celtic Christianity wove angel lore into their unique spiritual tapestry. Irish and Scottish traditions speak of fiery beings who guard sacred places and teach ancient wisdom. While they don't always use Uriel's name, the descriptions match his nature perfectly. Celtic angels dance on the boundaries between worlds, bringing divine fire to earthly concerns. Folk traditions across Europe preserved Uriel's memory in gentler ways. Country people told stories about angels who appeared during disasters, warning of floods or protecting crops from storms. They didn't always know the theological names, but they recognized the fiery presence that brought both warning and comfort. Village churches displayed crude but heartfelt images of flame-bearing angels. The Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah places Uriel in complex cosmic hierarchies. Here he represents divine judgment tempered by mercy, the fire that burns away illusion to reveal truth. Kabbalistic texts describe his role in the soul's journey toward enlightenment. He appears at crucial moments of spiritual transformation, offering the fire that burns but does not consume. American folk magic incorporated Uriel through the traditions that immigrants brought from the old country. Pennsylvania Dutch hex signs sometimes included symbols associated with the angel of fire. African American spiritual traditions, blending Christian and ancestral elements, honored fiery angels who protected communities and guided souls through difficult times. Native American traditions, while having their own rich spirituality, sometimes found resonance with Uriel's nature when they encountered Christian teachings. The idea of a fiery spirit who brings wisdom and guards sacred places aligned with indigenous concepts of spirit guardians and sacred fire. These parallels helped bridge different spiritual worlds. Asian Christian communities developed their own relationships with angelic figures like Uriel. Chinese and Korean Christians incorporated angel devotion into their cultural expressions of faith. Art from these regions shows angels with Asian features and local artistic styles, but carrying the same universal symbols of fire and wisdom. Latin American Catholicism embraced Uriel with particular warmth. Mexican and South American traditions honor him as a powerful intercessor and protector. Folk art depicts him with vibrant colors and local cultural elements. He appears in home altars and community celebrations, bridging the gap between official church teaching and popular devotion. The Roma people, scattered across many countries, carried their own angel traditions that often included Uriel-like figures. These travelers between cultures served as living bridges for spiritual ideas, sharing stories of fiery angels wherever their caravans stopped. Their oral traditions preserved ancient wisdom in constantly changing forms. Modern global communication has created new opportunities for cross-cultural understanding of Uriel's universal appeal. Online communities share stories and artwork depicting the angel of fire from dozens of different cultural perspectives. These digital gatherings show how the same spiritual needs express themselves in wonderfully diverse ways. Contemporary interfaith dialogue often discovers common ground in figures like Uriel. Representatives from different traditions find they honor similar beings under different names. These conversations reveal how angels serve as bridges between faiths, carrying messages of universal love and wisdom that transcend theological boundaries. New Age spirituality has created its own global interpretation of Uriel's role. Practitioners worldwide invoke him as a guide for personal transformation and spiritual growth. While these modern approaches might differ from ancient traditions, they continue the pattern of cultures adapting angelic wisdom to their contemporary needs. Art museums today display Uriel's image as interpreted by artists from dozens of different cultures and time periods. Visitors can trace his journey across continents and centuries, seeing how each tradition found its own way to express the same essential truth about divine fire, wisdom, and guidance. The internet age has allowed small communities with unique Uriel traditions to share their stories with the world. Isolated groups that might have been forgotten now contribute their voices to the global understanding of this ancient angel. Every culture adds new colors to the flame that has burned since time began. Through all these cultural expressions, the core of Uriel's message remains constant. Wisdom is available to those who seek it. Divine fire burns in every human heart. The light that guides us home transcends every boundary we create. In recognizing these truths, cultures separated by thousands of miles and years find themselves united in the glow of the same eternal flame. Uriel and occultism. When the Renaissance gave way to the Enlightenment, some minds turned away from angels and toward reason, but others moved in a different direction, seeking ancient wisdom in texts that mainstream religion had abandoned. In this shadow world of occult knowledge, Uriel found a new kind of reverence, becoming a central figure in magical traditions that honored him not just as messenger, but as teacher of hidden truths. The word occult simply means hidden, and the practitioners who embraced this path believed that the deepest spiritual truths had been concealed from ordinary view. They found in Uriel's story everything they sought: an angel who revealed cosmic secrets to worthy seekers, who commanded the transformative power of divine fire, who served as bridge between heavenly wisdom and earthly understanding. Medieval grimoires, those hand-copied books of magical instruction, began featuring Uriel prominently in their angelic hierarchies. These texts describe methods for calling upon his guidance in matters of wisdom and illumination. The rituals were complex, filled with careful preparations and precise invocations. Practitioners believed that approaching such a powerful being required deep respect and proper protocol. The Hermetic tradition found particular kinship with Uriel's nature. Hermeticists sought to understand the correspondence between earthly and heavenly realms, believing that divine patterns repeated themselves at every level of existence. Uriel, with his role as revealer of cosmic mysteries, became their patron and guide. His fire represented the illumination that comes from understanding these hidden connections. John Dee, the famous Elizabethan mathematician and mystic, claimed to receive communications from Uriel through his crystal scrying sessions. Dee's detailed records describe conversations with the angel about the nature of reality, the structure of the heavens, and the destiny of nations. Whether these encounters were supernatural or psychological, they influenced European occultism for centuries to come. The Golden Dawn, perhaps the most influential magical order of the modern era, placed Uriel at the southern quarter of their ritual circle, associated with the element of earth and the power of divine judgment. Members learned elaborate ceremonies for invoking his presence and seeking his guidance. The order's leaders taught that Uriel could help practitioners develop their intuitive faculties and access higher wisdom. Kabbalistic magic embraced Uriel as one of the four great archangels who stood at the corners of creation. In this tradition, he represented the divine quality of understanding, not simple knowledge, but the deeper comprehension that comes from spiritual illumination. Practitioners meditated on his Hebrew name, seeking to embody his qualities of wisdom and divine fire. Angelic magic developed elaborate systems for working with beings like Uriel. These weren't attempts to command angels, but rather methods for aligning human consciousness with angelic wisdom. Practitioners created talismans bearing Uriel's symbols, performed invocations at times associated with his influence, and sought his guidance through various forms of divination. The Rosicrucian tradition honored Uriel as a master of the secret fire that transforms base metals into gold, not literally, but spiritually. They taught that his flame could burn away the dross of ordinary consciousness, revealing the golden nature of the enlightened soul. Their texts described him as a teacher who appeared to worthy students at crucial moments in their spiritual development. Alchemy, that mystical art of transformation, found in Uriel a perfect symbol for the divine fire that powers all change. Alchemical texts described various spiritual fires, but the fire of Uriel was special. It burned without destroying, purified without consuming. Medieval alchemists saw in him the secret of their great work, the transformation of the soul from lead into gold. Ceremonial magicians developed elaborate rituals for invoking Uriel's presence. These weren't casual prayers, but carefully choreographed ceremonies involving specific times, directions, colors, and incantations. Practitioners wore robes of red and gold, colors associated with his fiery nature. They burned incenses of frankincense and cinnamon, scents believed to attract his attention. The Key of Solomon, one of the most famous grimoires in Western magical tradition, includes detailed instructions for calling upon Uriel. The text describes him as particularly responsive to seekers of wisdom and understanding. It provides specific prayers and offerings designed to honor his nature and request his guidance in matters of divine knowledge. Modern chaos magic has taken a different approach to working with Uriel. Rather than following ancient protocols exactly, chaos magicians adapt his symbolism to contemporary needs. They might invoke him for help with computer programming, seeing his role as revealer of hidden patterns as perfectly suited to understanding code and algorithms. Wiccan traditions often honor Uriel as one of the four elemental guardians, though different traditions associate him with different elements. Some connect him to fire, others to earth. His role remains consistent. He brings wisdom, protection, and the illuminating fire of understanding to those who call upon him with sincere hearts. Tarot enthusiasts find Uriel's energy reflected in various cards of the major arcana. Some see him in the Hermit, carrying his lantern of wisdom to light the way for seekers. Others connect him to Judgment, with its themes of spiritual awakening and divine calling. His influence appears throughout the deck for those who know how to look. Crystal healers work with stones they believe carry Uriel's energy. Carnelian and citrine, with their warm golden colors, are thought to channel his fiery wisdom. Practitioners hold these stones during meditation, seeking to connect with his illuminating presence. Whether the power lies in the crystals or in the focused intention, many report profound experiences. Astrologers have connected Uriel to various celestial bodies and influences. Some associate him with the sun, seeing him as the angel who brings divine light to earthly consciousness. Others connect him to Jupiter, planet of wisdom and teaching. These astrological correspondences help practitioners time their workings for maximum effectiveness. Dreamworkers invoke Uriel's guidance for understanding the hidden meanings in their nighttime visions. They believe he can appear in dreams as a teacher or guide, helping dreamers interpret symbols and messages from their unconscious minds. Dream journals often record encounters with fiery beings who offer wisdom and insight. Energy healers see Uriel as a master of spiritual fire that can burn away blockages and illuminate areas of needed healing. They visualize his golden flame surrounding clients, dissolving negative patterns and revealing the path to wellness. His healing isn't gentle like Raphael's, but transformative, burning away what no longer serves. The internet age has created new communities of practitioners who share techniques for working with Uriel. Online forums buzz with discussions of successful invocations, meaningful dreams, and synchronicities that seem to carry his signature. These digital covens maintain the ancient traditions while adapting them to modern life. Academic scholars of esotericism study these magical traditions with increasing respect. They recognize that whether or not angels literally exist, the psychological and spiritual benefits of working with archetypal figures like Uriel are real and measurable. The practices that developed around him serve genuine human needs for meaning, guidance, and transformation. Modern practitioners often emphasize that working with Uriel isn't about gaining supernatural powers, but about developing natural human capacities for wisdom and understanding. His fire doesn't come from outside, but awakens what already burns within. The magic lies not in commanding angels, but in aligning with the divine potential that sleeps in every human heart. Contemporary occultism has moved away from the elaborate ceremonial approaches of previous centuries. Today's practitioners might simply light a candle and speak Uriel's name with sincere intention. The complexity lies not in the ritual, but in the inner work of becoming worthy of the wisdom he offers. Critics worry that treating angels as magical allies reduces them to cosmic vending machines, available to fulfill human desires on demand. Serious practitioners counter that true magical work with beings like Uriel requires deep spiritual development and genuine service to the greater good. The angel's fire burns away selfish motivations, leaving only pure intention. The occult tradition has kept Uriel's flame burning through centuries when mainstream religion forgot his name. In their libraries and lodges, his stories survived. In their rituals and meditations, his presence remained accessible. They preserved what others abandoned, maintained what others allowed to fade. Whether approached through ancient grimoires or modern magical systems, Uriel continues to serve as a bridge between human seeking and divine wisdom. His fire illuminates the hidden connections between all things, reveals the patterns that underlie apparent chaos, and guides seekers toward the truth that burns at the heart of existence. Uriel in modern literature. The printed word gave Uriel new wings to soar into minds that might never have encountered him in church or synagogue. Modern literature became his sanctuary, a place where he could speak freely without the constraints of official doctrine. Authors discovered in this ancient angel a character rich with possibility, mysterious enough to intrigue, powerful enough to inspire, human enough to touch hearts seeking meaning in an increasingly complex world. Romantic poets of the 18th and 19th centuries found Uriel irresistible. They were drawn to his role as the angel of fire and wisdom, seeing in him a perfect symbol for the creative flame that burns within artists. William Blake, that visionary poet-painter, included angelic figures reminiscent of Uriel in his illuminated works. Blake's angels blazed with divine fire while remaining intimately connected to human experience. Lord Byron's dramatic verses often featured beings caught between heaven and earth, much like Uriel in his various traditions. The angel's complex nature, simultaneously judge and teacher, destroyer and illuminator, appealed to romantic sensibilities that celebrated both beauty and darkness. These poets understood that true wisdom often comes wrapped in flame. American transcendentalists embraced Uriel as a symbol of divine knowledge available to every seeking soul. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a poem titled Uriel that caused controversy in his time by suggesting that conventional religious thinking was too limited. Emerson's Uriel speaks truths that disturb the comfortable order of heaven itself, representing the poet's belief that spiritual insight must constantly challenge established forms. Victorian spiritualists, fascinated by communication with otherworldly beings, often reported contact with angels bearing Uriel's characteristics. While these seance transcripts might not qualify as great literature, they influenced popular fiction of the era. Ghost stories and supernatural romances began featuring angelic guides with fiery natures and mysterious wisdom. Fantasy literature discovered Uriel as the 20th century dawned. Authors creating elaborate mythologies found in him a ready-made character with centuries of traditional associations. His role as Guardian of Eden provided natural conflict and drama. His mastery of divine fire offered spectacular visual possibilities. His wisdom made him a perfect mentor for fictional heroes seeking enlightenment. C.S. Lewis, though he rarely used Uriel by name, populated his Narnia chronicles with angelic beings whose characteristics echo the ancient traditions. His Aslan carries many of Uriel's qualities: the divine fire that both judges and redeems, the wisdom that guides through sacrifice, the guardianship of sacred spaces. Lewis understood how ancient archetypes could breathe new life into contemporary stories. Science fiction writers found unexpected uses for Uriel's imagery. Stories about artificial intelligence sometimes invoke the angel of wisdom as a symbol for the divine spark that might animate thinking machines. Space exploration narratives use his role as cosmic teacher to imagine encounters with alien intelligence. The fire that illuminates earthly minds works equally well for minds among the stars. Contemporary fantasy has embraced Uriel with particular enthusiasm. Urban fantasy novels set in modern cities often feature him as a character struggling to adapt ancient purposes to contemporary challenges. These stories explore what it might mean for an angel of divine fire to operate in a world of electric lights and digital information. The conflicts write themselves. Horror literature uses Uriel's dual nature, beautiful and terrible, to create figures who embody both salvation and destruction. Stephen King and other masters of the genre understand that the most effective supernatural beings are those who could be either blessing or curse. An angel with a flaming sword makes readers deliciously uncertain about his intentions. Religious fiction has reclaimed Uriel from the margins, featuring him prominently in novels about biblical times and spiritual warfare. These books explore his traditional roles while adding psychological depth and contemporary relevance. Authors imagine his inner life, his relationships with other angels, his feelings about the cosmic dramas in which he participates. Poetry continues to find rich material in Uriel's story. Contemporary poets use his imagery to explore themes of wisdom, transformation, and the price of knowledge. His fire becomes a metaphor for everything from romantic passion to political revolution. The angel who guards Eden's gate stands watch over whatever paradise modern poets fear losing. Young adult literature has discovered Uriel as a character who speaks to teenage concerns about identity and purpose. Novels featuring angel protagonists often give him mentor roles, teaching young heroes about their own hidden nature and cosmic destiny. His combination of wisdom and fire appeals to readers navigating their own transformations. Literary criticism has begun taking these angelic appearances seriously. Scholars study how authors use figures like Uriel to explore theological and philosophical questions that might seem too heavy for direct treatment. The angel becomes a lens through which writers can examine ultimate questions about good, evil, knowledge, and the nature of existence. Graphic novels and comic books have embraced Uriel's visual appeal. Artists love drawing his flaming sword and fiery wings. Writers appreciate his complex moral position, not quite hero, not quite villain, but something more interesting than either. Comic book Uriel often struggles with cosmic duties that conflict with earthly compassion. Feminist authors have reimagined traditional angel hierarchies, sometimes presenting Uriel in ways that challenge conventional gender assumptions. These reinterpretations explore how ancient symbols can carry new meanings while maintaining their essential power. The fire of wisdom burns equally bright regardless of the form it takes. Children's literature handles Uriel more carefully, emphasizing his protective and teaching aspects while downplaying the more terrifying elements of his traditional role. Picture books show him as a gentle guardian whose flame brings comfort rather than fear. These early introductions plant seeds that may flower into deeper spiritual seeking later in life. Literary translation has brought Uriel's story to new audiences worldwide. Ancient texts like the Book of Enoch are now available in dozens of languages, allowing readers everywhere to encounter his character in something approaching its original form. Each translation adds subtle new dimensions to his eternal story. Book clubs and reading groups often find themselves drawn into deep discussions when they encounter literature featuring Uriel. His character raises questions that go beyond plot and characterization to touch on fundamental issues of meaning, purpose, and spiritual truth. He transforms casual readers into seekers, at least for the duration of their reading experience. The digital age has democratized access to both ancient texts about Uriel and contemporary fiction featuring him. Ebooks and online libraries make his stories available to anyone with internet access. This availability has sparked new creative works as readers encounter his character and feel inspired to add their own voices to his ongoing story. Through all these literary appearances, Uriel maintains his essential nature while adapting to new contexts and concerns. He remains the angel of fire and wisdom, the guardian of sacred spaces, the teacher who illuminates hidden truths. Literature has given him a home where he can continue his ancient work of awakening human consciousness to its divine potential. Uriel in popular culture television screens and movie theaters became modern cathedrals where ancient angels found new congregations. Uriel stepped out of dusty manuscripts and into living rooms across the world, his fiery presence now measured in ratings and box office receipts. Popular culture transformed him from forgotten theological figure into recognizable character, though not always in ways his ancient admirers might recognize. The supernatural television boom of recent decades embraced angelic characters with enthusiasm. Shows like Supernatural and Lucifer featured Uriel as a recurring character, though often with contemporary twists on his traditional role. These portrayals emphasized his fire and judgment while sometimes missing the gentler aspects of his wisdom and guidance. Television, Uriel became more warrior than teacher, more destroyer than illuminator. Comic book publishers discovered gold mines in angelic mythologies. DC Comics featured Uriel in their Hellblazer series, while Marvel incorporated angel-like beings with similar characteristics into their cosmic storylines. These graphic portrayals could show his flaming sword and celestial power with vivid visual impact that written descriptions couldn't match. Comic book art brought ancient visions to life in full color. Video games found Uriel particularly appealing as a character type. Role-playing games often include him as a powerful ally or formidable boss, complete with fire-based attacks and abilities related to wisdom and judgment. Players could interact with digital versions of the ancient angel, making choices that would determine whether he appeared as friend or foe. Gaming made theology. Hollywood discovered that angels sold tickets, though the results weren't always theologically accurate. Movies like The Prophecy and Legion featured angels engaged in cosmic warfare, with characters bearing Uriel's attributes even when they used different names. These films emphasized spectacle over spirituality, but they introduced millions of viewers to the basic concept of archangels with distinct personalities and powers. Music videos began incorporating angelic imagery, with artists using Uriel's symbols of fire and wisdom to add depth to their visual storytelling. Hip-hop artists referenced archangels in their lyrics, while rock bands used flame-wreathed figures in their album artwork. The Angel of Fire found himself soundtracking human experiences he'd never dreamed of witnessing. Reality television took an unexpected interest in angelology through shows about paranormal investigation and spiritual healing. While these programs rarely mentioned Uriel by name, they popularized concepts about an angelic intervention and divine guidance that aligned with his traditional roles. Cable television became an unlikely vehicle for ancient spiritual ideas. Social media created new spaces for Uriel's influence to spread. Instagram accounts shared artwork depicting him in various styles, from classical Renaissance paintings to modern digital art. Facebook groups dedicated to angel enthusiasts discussed his role in their personal spiritual practices. Twitter users shared inspirational quotes attributed to him, whether historically accurate or not. Merchandise capitalized on renewed interest in angelic figures. T-shirts, jewelry, and home decor items featured Uriel's image and symbols. New Age stores stocked angel cards and figurines bearing his likeness. The ancient angel became a brand, though one with deeper spiritual resonance than most commercial products could claim. Japanese anime and manga discovered Western angelology and created their own interpretations. Shows like Evangelion featured angels with characteristics reminiscent of Uriel, though filtered through distinctly Japanese aesthetic and narrative sensibilities. These cross-cultural interpretations created fascinating hybrid visions of angelic power and wisdom. Documentary filmmakers explored the historical development of angel beliefs, with Uriel featuring prominently in these educational programs. History Channel specials and PBS documentaries examined his role in various religious traditions, bringing scholarly research to popular audiences. Television became a classroom where ancient wisdom met contemporary curiosity. Podcast culture embraced discussions about angels and spirituality. Long-form conversations about Uriel's role in various traditions found dedicated audiences hungry for deeper understanding than television soundbites could provide. These audio programs allowed for nuanced exploration of complex theological and historical topics. Young adult novels featuring angel protagonists often included characters based on Uriel. These books reached teenage audiences who might never encounter him in religious contexts, introducing his story through romance and adventure rather than theology. Popular fiction became missionary work for ancient archetypes. Fashion designers drew inspiration from angelic imagery, creating clothing lines that incorporated symbols associated with Uriel. High-end designers and street fashion alike embraced flame motifs and golden colors reminiscent of his traditional depictions. Runway models became unlikely evangelists for angelic aesthetics. Internet memes found humor in angelic hierarchies, though often in ways that would horrify traditional believers. Uriel became the subject of jokes about celestial bureaucracy and divine customer service. While these treatments were irreverent, they demonstrated his cultural penetration beyond religious circles. Streaming services discovered audience appetite for supernatural content, commissioning shows and movies that featured angelic characters. Netflix originals and Amazon Prime productions brought new interpretations of Uriel to global audiences. The Angel of Fire found himself dubbed into dozens of languages, spreading his influence further than the medieval missionaries ever dreamed. Virtual reality experiences began incorporating angelic encounters, allowing users to meet digital versions of beings like Uriel. These immersive technologies offered unprecedented opportunities for experiential learning about spiritual traditions. Users could walk through virtual Eden or witness cosmic visions that previously existed only in text. Celebrity culture occasionally embraced angelic themes, with famous figures claiming guidance from beings like Uriel. Whether sincere spiritual conviction or publicity strategy, these endorsements brought his name to audiences who followed entertainment news more closely than religious developments. Children's programming handled angelic themes more carefully, emphasizing protection and guidance over judgment and fire. Animated shows featured angel characters with Uriel's gentle teaching aspects, while avoiding his more intimidating traditional roles. These programs planted seeds that might grow into deeper spiritual seeking later in life. The phenomenon of angel investing in startup companies created unexpected linguistic connections to figures like Uriel. While these financial angels had nothing to do with celestial beings, the terminology created mental associations that influenced how popular culture thought about divine intervention in human affairs. Popular culture's treatment of Uriel reveals both opportunities and challenges for ancient spiritual traditions in modern contexts. While mass media exposure introduces his story to vast new audiences, it often simplifies or distorts complex theological concepts. The Angel of Fire burns bright in contemporary consciousness, even if not always in the ways his ancient chroniclers intended. Through all these popular manifestations, something essential about Uriel persists. Whether portrayed as cosmic warrior or wise teacher, destroyer or protector, he represents humanity's ongoing hunger for divine guidance and meaning. Popular culture may dress him in new clothes, but it cannot entirely obscure the eternal fire that has drawn human hearts to his story for thousands of years. the eternal watcher. Here at the end of our journey through Uriel's long story, we find ourselves where we began, in the presence of mystery. This angel, whose name means fire of God or light of God, has watched over human consciousness for millennia, appearing when needed, withdrawing when forgotten, but never truly absent from the deep places where souls seek meaning. Time moves differently for beings like Uriel. While civilizations rise and fall, while languages are born and die, while technologies transform human life beyond recognition, he remains constant. The same fire that illuminated Enoch's visions burns today in meditation halls and prayer closets. The same wisdom that guided ancient prophets whispers still to hearts ready to hear. His story reveals something profound about how spiritual truth survives across centuries. Not through official channels alone, though those matter. Not through institutional preservation, though that helps. Truth survives because it meets genuine human needs. People in every generation hunger for wisdom, seek guidance, long for connection with something greater than themselves. Uriel endures because he answers these eternal longings. We've traced his path from ancient Mesopotamian angel lore through Jewish apocalyptic literature, from early Christian art through medieval mysticism, from Renaissance painting through modern popular culture. In every era, he adapts to new circumstances while maintaining his essential nature. The fire changes form but never dies. His wisdom spoke to Second Temple Jews seeking understanding of cosmic mysteries. It comforted medieval Christians facing plague and war. It inspired Renaissance artists creating beauty from divine visions. It guides contemporary seekers navigating technological complexity and spiritual uncertainty. Each generation receives exactly the illumination it needs. The excluded books that tell his story most fully, works like Enoch and other apocryphal texts, demonstrate how living traditions transcend official boundaries. While church councils debated which texts belonged in the biblical canon, believers preserved other writings in monastery libraries and private collections. Hearts held what institutions released. His role as guardian of Eden carries particular resonance for modern consciousness. We live in an age acutely aware of paradise lost, environmental destruction, social fragmentation, the erosion of meaning and community. Uriel's vigil at the garden's gate reminds us that some things remain sacred, protected, worth preserving for future renewal. The fire he represents isn't destructive, but transformative. In a world often divided between those who fear change and those who embrace it recklessly, Uriel offers a third way. His flame burns away what needs to go while preserving what deserves to remain. He teaches discrimination, the wisdom to know the difference. His appearance in popular culture, however simplified or distorted, testifies to humanity's persistent need for archetypal figures who embody transcendent values. Even secular entertainment cannot entirely escape the pull of these ancient symbols. They satisfy hungers that material success and technological achievement cannot touch. The angel of repentance offers hope to generations burdened by collective and personal failures. His message echoes across centuries. Transformation is always possible. Wisdom awaits those who seek it. Divine fire burns in every human heart. These aren't outdated religious concepts, but living realities for anyone willing to acknowledge them. Mystical traditions East recognize beings like Uriel because they address universal spiritual experiences. The names and forms may differ between cultures, but the underlying reality remains constant. Humans encounter divine wisdom, receive guidance from beyond ordinary consciousness, experience transformation through sacred fire. His teaching role becomes increasingly relevant as information multiplies exponentially while wisdom seems increasingly scarce. Facts flood our awareness, but understanding lags behind. Uriel represents the discriminating intelligence that can sort truth from falsehood, essence from distraction, the eternal from the merely temporary. The occult traditions that preserved his memory through centuries of official neglect demonstrate how spiritual truth finds ways to survive. Whether through ceremonial magic or simple personal devotion, whether in elaborate grimoires or quiet prayers, his influence continued. Hearts that seek will always find the light they need. Modern literary treatments of his character reveal how ancient archetypes speak to contemporary concerns. Writers discover in Uriel's story themes that resonate with current struggles: the price of knowledge, the burden of wisdom, the challenge of bridging different worlds. Good literature makes the eternal present. His story ultimately transcends any single religious tradition or cultural expression. He belongs to the collective human imagination, to our shared bank of symbols for experiences that transcend ordinary categories. Whether encountered in ancient texts or modern fiction, in formal worship or private meditation, he remains available to consciousness prepared to recognize him. The eternal watcher sees all our searching, all our stumbling, all our small victories and devastating failures. He witnesses the courage required for each soul's journey toward truth. His fire burns as compassion for the difficulty of human existence and as encouragement for the divine potential that sleeps within every heart. As you drift toward sleep, perhaps touched by the ancient stories we've shared, remember that the watchers are still watching, the teachers are still teaching. The fire that has burned since before time began still offers its light to anyone willing to turn toward its warmth. In the quiet spaces between waking and sleeping, between knowing and unknowing, between the human and the divine, Uriel's presence remains. Not as doctrine to be believed or theology to be defended, but as living reality available to every consciousness that recognizes its own need for wisdom, guidance, and transformation. The angel of fire watches still, patient as eternity, bright as hope, warm as love itself. His story continues in every heart that seeks the light, in every soul that welcomes the flame, in every spirit that recognizes the divine fire burning at the center of existence. He waits there now, in the place where all stories end and begin, ready to guide whoever is ready to be guided home.